Okay, everybody, good morning or good afternoon. It's Tuesday, June 4th. This is the Board of Commissioners work session, and today we have a joint meeting with Open Space and Trails Board, and it's a working lunch, so tell the audience can forgive us for eating on camera. I guess that's all I need to say. We are going to start out with Castle Creek Trail update with Gary Tenenbaum.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm Gary Tenenbaum. I'm the Director of Pickens County Open Space and Trails. And with me is Austin Weiss, who is the city's Parks and Open Space Director.
Welcome.
And who should be sitting to my left is the county engineer, G.R. Fielding. So anyway, that's a nice way of inviting him up here.
I lost the bet at the over-under.
So, what we're here today to talk about is an update on the Castle Creek Trail. And, we've been working on this trail for over 2.5 years, and we're working through a public process on that. And yes, Patty, you're correct. It's been a lot longer than that. And so, in the budget of 2019, both the city and county put funds to do a design build on the Castle Creek Trail to see, to take what was designed originally and the 30% and to bring it to construction level documents and to get a cost estimate. And so we have started in March with our consultants, which is SGM and Gould Construction, to come up with a buildable plan in this corridor and to look at all the geotechnical constraints, to look at the rock fall and how to mitigate that, to truly, one of the main goal of this is to improve the safety for pedestrians and bicycles in this corridor and to, also accommodate, the amount of road cyclists that go up here and also the traffic that goes through this corridor. And so when we originally came with this idea, what really came out was when you get to the music school, which has gone through a major renovation, and the Aspen Country Day School also went through a major renovation, really truly the entrance to Aspen is kind of at their driveway. And, the reality is there's a lot of pedestrians and bicyclists that go to these campuses. There's a lot of bicyclists that use this road, and this kind of is the entrance to the more urban area of Aspen. So when we were designing this, one of the big pieces was to try to slow down the traffic, because right now it's a 35-mile-an-hour zone, and so to slow down the traffic and to improve the safety for the pedestrians and bicycles. And so, if you look up at the screen, this is the new typical section, and this kind of gives you an overview on how the design has evolved. The overall width of the improvements is the same. It's how we allocate those widths that changed a little bit from the 30% design. And I can kind of go through why. So if you look at the overall design, this is the same width that we had for the 30% designs, but we're allocating things differently. And so in the 30% design, we had a 2 to 4 foot shoulder. We had two 11-foot travel lanes. We only had about a 2-foot buffer between the travel lane and the removable bollards, and then a 6-foot shared use trail. And then you'd have a little shoulder on the side and a pedestrian railing in the areas that, most of the areas have a pretty good drop off there. So, and so that was the original design. So what has happened is we've narrowed this a little bit to a 2-foot shoulder, and basically did that because we needed to save some on this side, but also there was some concern that if we made a 4-foot bike lane that people would ride 2 abreast uphill. And so having a 12-foot area there does provide, area for uphill bikers on this side. The 10-foot travel lanes slow down traffic pretty significantly because they're a foot narrower than they are now. There's speed tables within this section that are going to keep the traffic slow. And then the big change was to allocate it here to do a 4-foot bike lane on the downhill side with a 6-foot shared use trail into the railing with the removable bollard. And the reason why this is here is to provide adequate spacing and separation between the travel lane and pedestrians. The reality is when you try to meet all the guidelines, and GR's here, he can talk to you all about the guidelines because he worked on this extensively with the city's engineer to try to come up with what is truly safe between and what meets guidelines and what meets other areas have done this, because the difference between having it be bicycles and pedestrians, the pedestrians need to be protected from the road public. And one of the things we did not want to do here, due to aesthetics and also due to the fact that you put these bicyclists right next to, you didn't want to do a full-on crash-rated guardrail. And so to avoid that guardrail, a 4-foot separation between the lane and a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit and the pedestrians provides enough safety that the engineers felt comfortable with this design. And that's why we have that there. Secondly, there's a clear zone that motorists need to correct themselves in this area, and they need 10 feet before the edge of the road to be able to correct themselves if they have a big issue. So this also provides clear zone for motorists. And so that's why the allocation is changed on this side. This is a much safer shared use trail now, because honestly, if a bike is on this 6-foot, it can transfer into the downhill bike lane, and it'll be easier for pedestrians and bicyclists to pass each other. I think all road bikers will be on this, and it will definitely provide a lot of safety on that side of the road. Plus, there's a lot of room on this. If you look at how much, you have 12, 22, 26-foot lanes. Right now you only have 22, so you have 4 more feet for cars to move around the bicyclists on either side. So it does provide a huge amount of safety improvement for it. And so on this drawing, you can see where the existing Castle Creek Road is, and it's in red, so as we move through them, you can see them. One of the good things about this design too is that it has made it so we can do a 2-rail split rail fence on the outside edge. We do not have to do a steel pedestrian rail anymore. So the aesthetics are much better with this too, because of the fact that you can do that. Now, the biggest issue is that it's what we're doing, and it also is on, when we started looking at the design, we did the test pits to see what was underneath the road and what was underneath the existing shoulder that's on this, and what we found was not good. It was, I don't know how else to say it, but when CTL came in, it's basically, and GR can fill you in exactly on the specifics of what was there, but it's a lot of organic material. It's not compactable, and really truly trying to do anything outside of where the road is, because the road has compacted underneath, but where outside of the road, we would have to dig up that whole area and create new compaction. And so what the design has done is we're going to edge of pavement on all the designs. So this is just a typical section to show you overall what the lines are, but when you start going through some of these areas, you'll see here's the existing Castle Creek Road. The trail will be at the edge of the road. What this does is it moves all of the impacts to the west side. There's very little to no impact to the east side. So any east side tree removal is now over. You're not going to see any of that because all the impacts are now on this side, which is the cut side, where all the cuts of the road are. So this has done a good job with the aesthetics because this whole side will be left alone. And so there will be no real impacts because we're just going to the edge of the road. Now we've got to add width to this side, so it makes these walls go higher. And that's where we're potentially going to have some cost issues. We're still working on the costs. We do not have the final cost. The contractor's working on it. Due to the additional design, based on the compaction, the clear zones, and the safety, it took longer to design this than we originally thought it would. So the contractor is now creating a guaranteed maximum price, and we should have that by Monday the 10th, and then we will start sharing it with you guys, especially if we need budget stuff. So this is a section that looks this is a typical section where the walls are not that high. This is only about, a 3 or 4 foot wall. The walls will be kind of a gravity wall, which is kind of a ready block wall. And
a lot of you should be familiar with the ready block wall. There's a lot of them in the valley. Snowmass Drive in Carbondale, the new wall that they put in there going up to the school, that's a ready block wall. The new wall that we put out at Public Works, that's the same thing. It comes with a nice stone facade on it.
And we can stain it to the same color as the soil nail wall. So you won't see a massive change between the two walls that come there. And this is first of all, it's hard to do soil nail walls when you're not tall enough. It's about a 5 foot maximum.
I have that problem all the time.
No comment. So in this one, this is where the smaller walls will be, and it'll be a ready block. We will stain it to match the soil nail walls. And so you can see what, a rafter bus looks like on a 10-foot lane. Cars look like on a 10-foot lane. It works. The engineers, this is a great traffic calming, is to have smaller lanes and the speed tables on will definitely slow people down. And so the next one is, here's a lower soil nail wall, but here you can kind of see the cut with the rockfall mitigation. And so the soil nail wall will be a sculptured wall, and you can see that in many places throughout the Roaring Fork Valley. And it really kind of matches more of the rock aesthetic in this area. It's going to be hard to match the nasty cut slope that's there now, but we're trying not to necessarily match that, but to retain that a bit.
A couple notes about the rockfall mitigation area. A few of the things that we're finding out as we're bringing the project to final design is that the shape of the slope actually ends up causing a lot of concern because a lot of the rockfall netting is designed to be at a very consistent grade. Because that slope has been moving itself over time, and then there is a lot of organics and trees and shrubs that actually hold it vertical. It has almost like a cornice at the top. So working through a lot of what's available out there to help conform to that shape has been pretty difficult. And so those are some of the details that we're still trying to get worked out.
Cool. Questions?
Oh, no, here's
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
I have 2 quick questions. First, you said the speed limit was 35 miles an hour.
But you're reducing it.
We are going to reduce it. That has not been done yet. I want to make sure that we have not lost that. It needs to be a school zone speed limit. The other thing is, I'm dying to know what was really under that road, when that road base.
Sure. So there's a few different ways to do geotechnical exploration. And so what they decided to do here was essentially saw cut about 3x5 sections of the road out and then just dig and see what they found. And it wasn't too far into digging that they found what was probably the backfill from when they put the sewer line in decades ago. And when they backfilled the sewer line, they just grabbed whatever was near the side of the road and put it in the hole. And so that ended up with all sorts of different material, including organics and things like that. As soon as you start disturbing those soils, especially near an oversteepened slope like what we have going down towards the creek, it's hard to get any sort of compaction back on that. And so there is a lot of concern that over time we'd just have kind of slow slippage. And with what was proposed out there initially as a concrete, is you don't have like slow failures like you have with asphalt. If it's going to happen, it's going to crack, and then all of a sudden you'll have, at first maybe an inch deflection down. And so it was determined that moving everything to the west would probably be the best course of action.
Okay, thanks.
While you're on the subject of that sewer line, for road bikers coming downhill, there's sort of a slalom course going through manhole covers that when you dodge them with those thin lanes, it can be a challenge and I think a danger. And I know we can't move the sewer line, but how are you accommodating those manhole covers in terms of bicycle safety?
It's going to be, first of all, by moving the road over we'll see where those sewer manholes lie here. And, this is going to need an overlay because of the way this whole thing is with the patching and everything like that. So we're going to look at how to incorporate those better into the road surface now. And there's definitely options that we can use that aren't as harsh as they are now.
And it's my recollection that those manhole covers are going to be roughly where the removable delineators are in that zone. So again, we'll have to see exactly where they line out, but I don't think they'll be in the travel lane of the traffic, and they may encroach into the shared use trail a bit. But and there are different types of manhole covers that can be used, some smoother and some rougher than others. So I'm sure we can find covers that are a little bit better than maybe what's out there today.
And obviously the elevation of those is pretty critical.
Yeah. But definitely we have that on our radar to deal with.
Michael?
A couple of questions. First on the delineate, by the way, I come in this really late, so if this is stuff you guys have already covered, just tell me to shut up. But on the delineators, it says removable. Are they also collapsible?
Yes.
So if you run into them, you go through them, not skewered on them.
Right.
So the second question is there, why not put a similar device between the bicycles and the cars? Or is it there?
It's, with putting bike lanes on side of roads, you don't necessarily want another, because it moves people into the lane. And so, having more things that you can potentially hit when you're coming down, because, it's basically 2 delineators in 4 feet. So I don't think the engineers would allow that to happen.
Okay.
Because it's putting a lot of kind of obstacles in the course of the travel lane and bike lane.
So the principal drive then is to keep the bicycles out of the pedestrians.
Well, it's also to provide a visual cue to the drivers that there's a separation there. But adding more vertical delineation like that is gonna really crowd the road. The downhill traffic, primarily with the bicycles, is more analogous, especially in a 25-mile-per-hour zone with the vehicles than it is with the pedestrians.
I didn't follow that.
So a bicyclist going down the hill, especially your typical road cyclist coming down Castle Creek Road, is going to be more analogous to the car than it is to the
Got it,
pedestrian.
thank you. Hence the division between, I got it.
And there's one other thing too, is if there's somebody who moves over for bikers in the uphill lane, and those cars then see somebody, the car has more room and doesn't hit the delineators.
Got it.
So it gives that overall more room in there. And the bikers that are in that downhill lane, you are on the road. That's part of the road.
Thank you.
Sure.
Last question is, why not using rock gabions instead of walls?
Well, rock gabions get to be a little bit difficult because you have to source all of that material. So now you're hauling in all of a basket that needs to be filled and it needs to be stacked. You're not going to necessarily fill it locally here. You're not going to be producing that much material. The ready block is something that is very readily available, and it's a lot cheaper because it goes together
cost
like
is
a
the
Lego.
answer.
It's like a Lego set. It's like really heavy Lego set, and so it's easy to construct. It goes up very quickly, and it's a lot less intensive as far as manpower to put together.
Thank you.
I have a question, speaking of the speed limits, and Michael brought up the downhill. Are we gonna be we've had an issue of the bikes actually going faster than the cars through a speed limit zone. Are we treating them as bicycles, or are we expecting them to try and go this speed limit?
Well, Patty, what you're asking is a little bit more of an enforcement question, and that's not necessarily our purview.
Right.
One of the things that we can certainly do, though, is have the speed tables be full width. There's been places where that hasn't happened, like Maroon Creek Road. There's a couple that are, people can kind of get up and around near T Lazy 7, those old speed bumps. But there's one in, one out there, and I know I realize that. But that's one of the things that that a lot of the guidance says now is you just go full width, because what'll also happen is you'll have people swerve just so they only have two wheels go over it, and things like that. So.
Right.
Because I know that was a concern about public safety issues for
they
cars, bike riders, and pedestrians.
They did full width. I mean, Castle Creek, Cemetery Lane Road has the full width things, and if you ride your bike down it, you have to go over the speed tables, and they're not speed bumps. So
No,
the speed tables you can get over, but you do have to slow down on a bike, and they'll be marked on the road, so you have to see them.
safety.
So hopefully, it will slow bikers down. So I just wanted to show this rendering that shows one of the largest walls that will be out there. That one's about 13 feet high, and the original, when we came in, we were thinking about 8 to 10 feet. So they are going to be higher because we're pushing everything to the west side. But these are soil nail walls that are sculptured rock that look, a lot more aesthetic than, the ready block walls, or, the vegetation out there right now is just a cut slope. So now you're going to retain that cut slope. So it's actually going to, reduce some of the maintenance on some of that section of the road, because it's holding all of the vegetation and holding all the rocks.
What's sculptured rock?
Basically, a soil nail wall. Where's this sculptured rock wall? That's
Most
Maroon
of the good
Creek.
examples are on the private walls behind some of the big houses that we have around the valley.
And
Sorry, but what is sculptured rock?
yeah.
Oh no, sculptured soil nail. So it's a sculptured grout to make it look more like a natural rock feature.
Okay, thank you.
And the closest example, and Patty, you probably remember this, is the Oklahoma Flats
Oh.
Trail.
Sheet rock.
Yeah, and it's sculpted so that it looks like natural rock.
Okay,
But it's
thank you.
Sure.
Graham?
If you travel that road in the spring, often you'll see boulders almost the size of Volkswagens coming down, and they wind up in the road. Are you going to be able to prevent that from happening, or is that something that is gonna happen and you've accommodated for it?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of places where it'll be eliminated by the walls that are going to be built. There's the largest section where we currently have the Jersey barriers that hold that in is the graphic that we have up now, and that's where the rockfall mitigation netting will be hung. And it'll perform similarly to what is in Snowmass Canyon and a lot of other areas, where essentially it'll
Walls.
self-shed and deposit the rocks in that ditch, but it's going to happen less sporadically, so to speak, and so it's going to be something that's much easier to maintain, where we can either pull the netting and let it shed, or if you have something that's big enough that's going to bring that stuff down, it's going to have a lot of the energy dissipated, so hopefully it just stays in that ditch now, as opposed to us having to put up things like Jersey barriers to keep it from always being on the road.
And you don't think it'll damage the soil nail wall?
That's something that we're working on the details right now, but if it's not going to be like this free falling rock that's going to have a big impact. It's going to be something that's going to tumble out of that pretty slowly.
And the good thing about the sculptured rock is if it does damage it a little bit, the soil nails are still in there. You can re-sculpture around that over time if it defaces and becomes aesthetically, something we want to deal with. So the last piece was in the city.
Don't wait.
This is right near the 488 housing parcel that's the city is
The new
building.
city.
And so
Yep.
Austin's been working on this with the designers to figure out how to make this happen with the adjacent
With
land.
the housing, yeah. So it really hasn't changed a whole lot since the drawings that we showed last fall. The biggest change has to do with the wall, and once again, we're using a gravity wall there. And that wall is going to perform two functions. It's going to support the trail, but also it's going to allow for the parking facility of 488 Castle Creek to come up fairly close to that wall. Because of the nature of having a wall so close to a parking lot, what we're doing here is we're adding a crash-rated railing along that portion to protect everybody, whether they're up top or down below. So there's an added layer of safety with that Wyoming type rail, as the engineers like to call it. And then as we come downhill past the affordable housing, once we get to their driveway, then we actually have a little bit more leeway to align the trail, and we're actually going to be able to pull it away from the edge of the road by about 5 feet. So there'll be a vegetated zone between the trail and the drive lane there. Just for that last, it's probably about 80 or 90 feet to intersect with the Merle Trail, the existing Merle Trail. And that'll do a couple of things. Obviously, that adds another layer of safety, but our hope is that we can make that turn onto the Merle Trail a little bit more smooth through there. As it is today, due to the angles of how the trail intersects the road, if you're a road cyclist coming down Castle Creek Road, it's actually kind of a tricky maneuver to make that right turn onto the trail because it's more than 90 degrees. And oftentimes those road cyclists will actually have to swerve a little bit left into the travel lane to make that turn. This remaining section of trail that is separated is also a little wider. It's 8 feet. So at that point, we're actually going to encourage even road cyclists that want to head into town and make that right turn. We're going to encourage them to get onto the trail at that point if they haven't already done so. So the nature of the trail changes a little bit, a little wider, a little separation there, and hopefully a little safer.
George had a question.
Yeah, you may get to this, but just in terms of timing and the how you're going to mitigate the traffic impacts, and then also, GR, has that project for the cable going up Castle Creek, has that been completed, or were they still going to be doing some work on that this summer?
They're going to be working on that most of the summer.
Most of summer too, so we'll have two projects going on.
Yeah, the impacts that we've seen from the cable project have been pretty minimal from a traffic control standpoint. Especially they're a little bit further up the road at this point, and most of the work that they have left are on the sections of the road where the forest where the road traverses the forest. So I think that from that standpoint, they've been getting people through, pretty timely. There has been barely any backups from that. This traffic control zone will definitely be more of an impact to the traveling public through here, to the point where when we've been getting all of our referrals for things like special events and group rides up there, that we've been notifying them and telling them where they can find information and start dates and all those things once we know exactly when that's going to be.
So the timing is, we need to get the cost, and that's, obviously, we are concerned. We might be back to see if you want to add more to this because of what, how the changes happened. And also the fact that the costs were created last year, and this year we're seeing a nice little spike again in construction costs. It's just part of trying to do it. We're seeing it on almost all of our projects. But besides that, we're looking at trying to, get those pieces together. We've been in touch with the music school, Aspen Country Day School. They're out now, so we've been in touch with both of them. We are going to do a public meeting once we have the price and we're ready to show what the traffic impacts and traffic is. We're going to do a public meeting. All of this will be online, and so I just got these, and I know people wanted to see them, but I just got them this morning at 10 o'clock to show you guys. And so once we're done with this, we're going to get this onto the website, send it out to our large email list, and once those pieces are going, we're still pretty confident if the numbers come back to something where everyone's comfortable with, that we can complete most of it or all of it this year, and just have some finishing details like sculpting that soil nail wall and other things for potentially next spring. But we're still moving forward with the fact that we want to get this done this year. So the timing on it is just really dependent on how the costs come out and how we move forward on that.
And so, do you have any idea in terms of the length of the project? Would it be a 90-day project?
Yes, once it starts, it's going to take at least, what I've heard, it's going to take at least 10 to 12 weeks to be able to finish this. The way they're doing the traffic control is not like last time where they were going to close the entire thing, the entire lane. They're going to do it in the sections they're working on. So they're smaller closure areas, and they will be, we're going to work on what the traffic control is, but at times where they're not working, they'll have a light that's motion activated, and it's kind of working on McLean Flats Road right now very well. And at other times where we have to get traffic through, like a rafter bus to get to the music school, or we have an event, we can put in flaggers to make that happen. But you're not going to have a 3/4 of a mile closure. You're only going to have smaller closure areas. So we'll be able to move people through pretty quickly. Right now we're looking at 2 to 4 minute stops at the most.
Amy and then Wayne had questions?
I just had a question in this section, Austin. You have parking then below the trail? And do you have any other kind of landscaping and such between that and the buildings that are
Yeah,
coming
that's a
in?
great question. What's illustrated here is actually just uphill from the housing, but where we do have that parking lot, what we've done is build in I believe it's a 5-foot buffer between the edge of the parking lot and the base of that wall to allow us to plant trees through there to replace any of the vegetation that will be impacted with the construction of this trail. So our goal is to provide screening between the road and the housing.
And how does that work with snow removal as well?
Yeah, that's actually one other note on that was one of our requests too, is to make sure that there was some sort of buffer there so that when the snow got pushed, that it wasn't being deposited on someone's hood.
I was gonna say,
Because this trail is not going to be maintained, and you'll remove the bollards between the bike lane and the pedestrian lane for snow removal in the wintertime, correct?
Yeah, so the trail itself may not quite likely will have snow on it all winter long. So the road spoils aren't all going to be pushed into that parking lot. From the driveway of 488 down to the existing Merle Trail, that will be a year-round maintained connection because it serves that housing community there.
Yeah.
So that'll be plowed throughout the entire winter.
Yeah.
And the snow removal of that is also being considered in our design.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Wayne, you had a
I
question?
don't have anything else. That snow removal thing answered my question.
I was just wanted to point out that the rafter bus has been replaced by a Mini Cooper, but that Mini Cooper looks so large in this illustration, it's making me nervous.
That is a large Mini Cooper.
I'm hoping it's, or is it a
That's funny,
Suburban?
because, these are 10-foot lanes, and
Yeah, what are you
the
trying to
bus
tell
is
us?
about 8 feet wide. So, because that's funny, because look at the truck.
But my point was, the thing that makes me nervous as a road cyclist, when I'm riding up Castle Creek Road, I've got a 2-foot wide thing at the edge of a sloping concrete ditch, which would be like a cheese grater, and it makes me nervous. I'm looking at that thinking, wow, the bicycle's going to stray, maybe, unless I'm not reading this correctly. That was my first question. This is a 2-foot wide bike lane on the uphill end with a precipice of sorts on one side and then the traffic lane on the other. I'm just guessing, my friend who I ride with always tends to stray into the lane, and that's probably what he would do here, right? It's just, it's so narrow, he wouldn't want to be so close to the edge. So how practical is that bike lane?
Well, let's take a look at it from a little different context. Right now, you have a 22-foot wide platform going all the way up there with a ditch on the uphill side and a slope that goes down to the river on the other, with virtually no shoulder over the entire thing. And now you have, is it about 32-foot wide template, and most times you're not going to have that perfect storm of a mix of traffic with bike coming down, bus coming down, car coming up, bike coming up, and no one has any room to move.
Right.
But even if you don't have any room to move, you still have your own space. We never had that before.
Got it. Okay.
And so as a general overall, it's an enormous, it's 50% more space to occupy. But all that being said, there's a reason for how we name things. And so that 2-foot shoulder is going to be used by bicyclists as a bit of their climb lane. We realize that it's pretty narrow. It's a lot better than what we have now. And that's without getting to, 18-foot walls and things of that nature up and down this stretch. That's about the amount of space that we can milk out of this.
Well, and also that's why we're calling it a shoulder. It's not
It's
a bike
not a lane,
lane.
it's a shoulder, okay.
Because the biker is allowed to be in the uphill lane, and the uphill car has a lot more room to move. And then obviously if there's a car coming downhill, it has room to move.
Right.
And so, yeah, there's very few times where you're gonna have that perfect storm of 2 bikes and a bus and a car. But if you do, it's a lot safer than it is now.
Right. And it'll be striped, white stripe
Yes.
on the edge. The other question is, so the road's moving to the west, you don't have the compaction situation on the west side, I suppose, you had with the road base as you did on the east.
We're going to be able to compact into a mountain versus off of a mountain.
Right. So
Is the
that's
idea.
the
So,
issue.
yeah, it's just a large excavation project into the mountain versus a large excavation off of the side of a mountain and trying to hold something that's oversteepened already on the side.
That's a good compactable material, that medium, so you're not going to be bringing in a lot of road base from, don't we know that yet?
Well, there's going to be need for new materials for everything west of that dark red line that's on this illustration.
That's what I thought.
We don't have a sewer line, too.
Yeah.
Because that was
Oh,
the
right,
biggest
on
problem,
the other
because
side.
we would have to excavate all around that sewer line and then compact on top of it all the way down to the sewer line. Where that side, we just have to get to a compactable spot. It's a much
Easier.
easier, much less expensive.
Graham had a question.
JR, is there another way to handle this detail right in here? As a road biker, it is a constrained space, and there's that drop-off. And because there's space, you kind of feel safe, but if you drop a road bike wheel off of that, you're going into the wall. And I don't know, it just
Makes you nervous.
makes
Why
me a
you wear
little
a
nervous.
This
Is
is
it filled with gravel or something that would?
Well, if it's filled with something, then we have to dig it out every year. And so one of the things that we're trying to balance is the ability to maintain a road system and a drainage system that positively drains water away from the road, off of the road, and create something that's safe. And you have your 2 feet of space on the shoulder and that lane to work with. I would be a bit hesitant to start to narrow that up because we don't have a lot of great opportunities to bring that water back across the road. Because once we bring it across the road, now we're depositing water on something that is steeper than 1-to-1 in many places and very erodible. And so if we're going to bring more water across in different places. So those are a lot of the things that we're trying to chase down as they go through the design. We can see if we can make it a little less steep, but there's a capacity that's needed to carry the water down the hill.
Because you can see on this side, this is actually not as steep as some of the areas are on the other side. And we just don't want to create that water just shooting down that hillside. So, but they are 3-to-1 slopes, so they aren't, it's not a huge drop. It is a drop, but it's not a monster drop. So
I wanted to ask one more thing also, just about as we're talking about the location of the manhole covers. Wouldn't it be great to have a manhole cover that identified itself better? You know, just if the color was different, if they were, you know, because whenever you have a lot of cyclists come through, people will come out and paint them, so you can actually see the hazard on a shady day when it's dappled light or whatever. And I'm just wondering if that's something we can build into this with. Do they make a manhole cover that's, you know,
Glow in the dark orange.
white leading edge or something?
Well, what we
just
can
a
do-
question, just a thought.
we can see where they land, because
have
if
to
they're
see,
not,
yeah.
let's see where they
Nice to
land.
mark them.
And, you know, once we find out where they land, you know, honestly, getting the flat covers that, you know, that you ride over and you don't even notice, and with new pavement, you know, we can really do a much better job than what there is now.
Got it.
And so, let's see about that before you start popping red ones in there, because
Well,
it
my
does
fluorescent
change the
paint.
aesthetic of that area.
God,
to have
I-
those.
They show up pink, we're gonna know who to put
You
it.
know who did
Because
it?
you
We
have,
can do pink.
they have rings too, don't they? Have manhole cover rings that you can drop in to help
Yeah, they-
smooth out that transition?
Yeah, and so basically so that you don't have to rebuild a manhole every time you do an overlay, they have all different size rings. The hard part is they don't make them down to say a 32nd of an inch or something like that. And so that's
Always
why,
a little-
or you have a flat manhole and you have a road that's at a grade. There's not a lot of graded rings, risers, and things like that. And so that's where you end up, and you also have the roads probably set a little bit more than everything else around it.
So,
Okay, well, I think,
Training wheels on
how
those
much more have you got? I think we're at
That's
the end of our rope on that one. Great, you're ahead of schedule then. What's next? We've got Emma Store coming up. Austin, thanks for coming in.
Thank you
Austin,
all.
nice to see you.
Nice to see everyone here.
Don't you guys love having lay people help you design your
Yeah,
yeah, it's all good questions. Not bad.
You want your backpack here?
Lindsay by herself?
I'll stay up.
Oh, Gary's coming back, okay.
There's always moral support somewhere.
You got a crowd
Easy on
behind
her,
you.
she's by herself today.
Is that not gonna work to plug my own in?
It should work. It worked last time. It might take a minute to recognize.
Yeah, it says
I
no
know, maybe
signal
we
on
need
our
some
screen
techno
here.
over here.
We may need to call in our pro. Okay.
There.
Great.
I mean, it's not. There we go. Okay, so I am Lindsay Etter. I'm planning and outreach for Open Space and Trails. I'm here just to give an update on the Emma Town Site Steering Committee process so far, just to make sure you're all aware of everything as it's moving forward. We started, well, just to recap a little bit, but last time you guys had a joint meeting, you appointed committee members to serve on the steering committee. There were designated representatives from the Emma Caucus, Town of Basalt staff, which has been a shifting staff member, which I think has actually been great to have more of their staff be aware of what's going on. And then a historic society liaison to relay information back to the variety of historic groups in the valley. In addition to that, there were 6 members of the public. So we had 2 different site tours just to make sure everyone could see the buildings and visit the site prior to beginning any discussion. Both were led by Susanna Reed, who's the county's historic preservation officer, and walked the members of the committee and a couple of members of the public through the structures and talked about what had been done to date to stabilize them and potential things that had been held that weren't completed at the time of stabilization that could provide opportunities in the future. And so then we had our first committee meeting all in one room last week. And so the point of that committee was really to review all of the background information the group had received to date. They received a packet of homework that included the Emma Caucus master plan, the management plan for the property, traffic study that we had done 6 years ago now with CDOT. What else was in there? Information on historic structures, information on a barrier that had been looked at in the past between the buildings and the highway, and information on the septic system that was updated last year. And so with that information, the purpose of that meeting was really to convene the group and discuss that information and develop a vision statement. So one thing that was exciting about that last meeting was that we were also able to have a member from Colorado Preservation Inc. attend. His name's Kim Grant, and that is a nonprofit group in the state of Colorado that works on historic sites and endangered places, as they call them, and our site was an endangered place up until being acquired by the county. And so they can help protect, which they've already done. Essentially, Emma's, in their mind, protected, but they can also in the future help facilitate any group that may potentially want to take on any programming there. So I think the exciting thing is that he has a lot of experience around the state with a lot of similar properties and the various ideas of how those have been successes. And then he can also, if the group were to recommend any use, that use, he could help that group or whatever that use is potentially with granting opportunities or any formal organization, things like that. So he was there to be a resource and to also kind of give an overview of how he could potentially interface with any potential future use. So then the group went and discussed the strengths, the challenges, and any additional questions they had with the buildings. I think the strength kind of fell into 4 different categories. One is obviously the buildings themselves are very beautiful and the history in the area. I think everyone on the committee agrees that that is, at the end of the day, why they want to be involved and what needs to be preserved. Other strengths included location in the mid-valley and location between the 2 basalts, as everyone calls it, and the visibility from the highway, which is also a challenge, but everybody knows where these structures are, and that's a positive. And then that they're a large space, they could have multiple uses in them in the future. Some of the challenges, also the proximity to the highway, which includes challenges with visuals, with noise, and then in particular in the winter, the plow spoils and how you handle that. Access and parking is a challenge, and additional questions came up around that. And then any money for additional work in the buildings. As you guys know, they're just a shell. You go inside, there's no floor, there are no services to those buildings. So even to get them to anything beyond what is essentially a storage facility will take money. And so the group is aware of that, and where that comes from or what happens in the future is really all part of the discussion right now. Some of the additional questions, and this is really next steps for staff, is looking at, well, really we need to circle back with CDOT and talk about how Emma is functioning currently and their position on how it is functioning currently, and then if there were any future use change in the Emma buildings, getting their pulse on that. Any existing precedent for highway barriers. There's some examples in the valley, but other examples outside the valley that could work potentially, and what that might cost. Can the Emma Trail be realigned around the buildings? And looking at that space between the building that the trail is currently on, between the buildings and the highway. If the trail were aligned, that would provide more space for barriers. What that looks like, all to be determined. But so basically staff's tasked now with getting more information on those questions and bringing it back to the group. And the last part of the last meeting was focused on developing a vision statement. We did a group activity to essentially guide the future discussion, because of course everybody's already excited to dive into what can these be. And so essentially we wanted the group to take a step back and develop a vision statement on what is something that they all could support, kind of checking any future ideas against. So what we came up with was the Emma Store buildings will honor their historic agricultural roots, the natural environment, and the character of Emma with high public value, and provide a space that celebrates the innovative spirit of this location. And so the next steps are staff is getting additional information to bring back to the group, and then we are going to start diving into the discussion of what could a potential future use be, and along with that is who would the advocate be for that and how would it be funded, because that's all part of it being a success or not. So that's where we are to date. Any more questions?
So this leaves out any opportunities with the house, is that correct?
Correct, yeah, the house is already going through different There's a roof.
Different
roof
process,
work.
the
Yeah.
roof work's being done, I think, as we speak, or should be.
Yeah, and that's right now part of the county's affordable housing discussion. So it's not part of this process.
Other questions?
No, it's good to see something moving along there.
Great. I'll have to thank the group for coming together, the public members who are part of this, for
How many,
taking the time to help
yeah,
us.
how many people, it said their response was greater than anticipated, how many people,
Originally,
yeah,
I'd have to double check. I think originally we had close to 40
Wow.
people. And then we put out an additional questionnaire. I think additional questionnaires we got back was like a little less than 15, maybe it was 14 questionnaires to review. Either way, that was still, I think,
yeah.
there's a lot of interest.
It's
so.
nice to see people interested in what's going on in their neighborhood.
I think that, no other questions, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Gary's still trying to get his dinner, sorry, we should
His
stall
lunch.
so he can finish his lunch. Thanks, Lindsay.
So,
This is just the
we have
update.
7 minutes left, so it's really, that's all we had for the joint public session,
Oh,
so.
okay. There, I thought
The
there was
rest
more,
was just
more update
updates on
stuff,
stuff.
okay. Got it.
Do we need to move to adjourn? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
You guys are adjourned. Well,
We
Thank
saved you
Thanks,
7
guys.
minutes.
Thank you.
I got
you.
early.
Thanks. So we gonna go early, or do we?
Let's take a break.
We're gonna come back at 1 o'clock, grassroots, taking a break. Thanks.
Actually, we're not due back until 1:15.
Oh.
Wow, it's 1:15. Thank you.
Well, we can take a 10-minute break.
Let's take
Yeah, we'll put out
15.
minutes and everything. We haven't done that yet. I just
Okay.
have a draft.
Welcome. Nice to see you. Okay, we're back on work session for Tuesday, June 4th. And up now we have staff and community presentations, and John will kick us off.
All right, thanks, Greg. Well, today,
Mike?
got it on. Are you not hearing it? Okay. So today we have the results of our employee attitude survey, which was conducted the first quarter of this year, and it's a survey that we do. We try and do every 2 years to kind of gauge how are we doing with our employees, what are areas, where are those areas that we're doing well, where are those areas where we could make improvements as an employer and as an organization. In 2016, we did our last survey, and as a result of that survey, we did several things. We restructured some of our teams. We made changes to our onboarding program for new employees and creating a public sector 101 kind of curriculum. We changed our performance management system, our review system, and did an update to that. Probably the biggest initiative that you guys approved was changes to our leave policy, our paid time off policy, and really making changes to our work-life balance. And then finally, our health and well-being initiatives and creating an employee advisory group around that, and really creating more offerings. And so we're looking forward to 2019 for a couple of reasons. One, to see if we had moved the needle in any of those areas, and also to identify the next set of priorities, because there is always something to work on, and I think our 2019 survey is no exception to that. So today we have a representative from Mountain States Employers Council. They are the third-party group that conducted the survey for us, and we have Mike with us today. I'll turn it over.
Thanks, John. Glad
Mike,
to be here.
tell me your last name.
Mike Neubauer,
Neubauer. Great, thank you.
and I work for now Employers Council. Used to be Mountain States.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They've changed, and we all still call it Mountain States, so it's fine. And what we've done and do for a lot of our members is provide them tools to kind of assess where they are in comparison to where they'd like to be, but also in comparison to other organizations. So they originally did a snapshot back in 2016 to kind of get a sense of where the organization was, what was working well, what wasn't working well, what could be improved. And as John said, they took action based on the results of that 2016 survey. And so we've updated the survey, new questions. So I'd kind of like to walk you through what we've found out, and feel free to jump in at any time. So if you look at the screens, 236 out of a possible 283 folks participated, which is a very, very high rate. It's 83%. And that's a lot more than we normally see. We're always pleased. We think everything's valid if you get up around 70%. Once you get into the mid-70s, that's good. We're happy with that. 83% is very good. We combined departments if there were fewer than 5 respondents, just to make sure there was no way to identify people, so they knew when they took the survey that their anonymity would be protected. And then the leadership team, the supervisors, folks who assign work, and then the survey contained 79 multiple choice questions, and then 5 open-ended and 4 demographic items. And we'll talk a little bit more about the demographic items, but we were able to slice and dice or sort it by what's your position. Are you in top leadership, middle management, or worker? How long have you been with the organization? What does that look like? What division and in what department? Now, this is kind of a high level, so all of those details are in the full report. So things we looked at, some kind of measurable extent: leadership, work-life balance, climate, communication, compensation, satisfaction, benefits, teaming. Do I feel like I'm part of a team? Training and development, empowerment, working conditions, and I just clicked it too early. Whoop, we'll go back. There we are. Working conditions, outcomes, and advancement, and health and well-being. And then we look at who took part in this survey. So if you look at, again, it's fairly small, staff and non-management over here going, goodness. Then supervision, managers, and then your senior leadership. So 155, 60, thank you, big enough to see. And then the 14 of the elected officials or executive team. This is the one I think is kind of interesting. If you look at the participation by tenure, we had 25 folks with 20 or more years participate. In 2016, we had 30. 15 to 20 years, we have 8, and we had 17 in 2016. 10 to 15, we had 17. This time we had 17. 5 to 10, 33 this time, and 23 last time. 3 to 5, 41, 27, and then 1 year less than 3 years, 69, and last time 41. So this is kind of a common phenomena. And the reason I stop here is it's important to think about how is the workforce changing. And I mentioned earlier this morning, 10,000 boomers a day turn 65, and they're leaving the workforce. So what you're seeing is that your workforce is becoming younger, and you're losing some of your more experienced, your more tenured workers as they retire. And that's going to be a continuing trend. And it's not just here in Pitkin County, it's cross country. So it's just one of the things that managers have to deal with as they think about moving forward and addressing issues that workers may have, is that I'm going to have a younger workforce. It's just what's going to happen. So any questions or thoughts about that? If you look over at the next slide, big shout out to everybody. The participation rate, as I said earlier, was very high. Up in the 80s, but if you look at the number of departments that actually had 100% participation, adult and family services, BITS, economic assistance, facilities, finance, fleet, human services, human resources, the manager's office, public health, public works, road and bridge, senior services, and solid waste. And you'll notice last time we only had 4 that had 100% participation. So people did a good job of encouraging their staff to take part in this, to give feedback, so I think that's important. Take a look at the data. The way this is scored on a Likert scale is anything that's 3.7 and above, 3.75, is very positive. 3.45 to 3.74 is positive, somewhat positive, 3.23 to 3.44, 301 to 322, neutral, and 3 and below is considered negative. So the mean on this survey was 3.86, up from 3.68 in 2016. So what that's telling me is that the staff took the information they got from the last survey and acted on it. They made changes that positively impacted the employees. Because one of the fears we always have is, and we always tell people, is that if you give a survey and then you only pay lip service to it after it's done, that actually becomes a demotivator. So when we get a rise in scores like that, it's a pretty good indicator that some positive changes have been made. So let's take a look at the dimensions. So somewhat positive scores, compensation, advancement, empowerment, human support, the climate, working conditions, getting into those positive ones. And then if you look at the number of very positive scores, communication, leadership, benefits, teams, supervision, outcomes, training and development, work-life balance, and satisfaction. So in general terms, the folks that work for the county feel like they've got a good job and they enjoy working here. So let's take a look at this year's data versus 2016. So if you look, again, higher on working conditions, about the same on work-life balance, training and development significantly higher, teaming, supervision, satisfaction, all of these are higher, outcomes, leadership, human support, empowerment, pretty significantly higher. Compensation, which is surprising, is higher. Usually compensation is a point of concern, and as we get later in the survey, you'll see that it got some of the lower scores, although they were still positive, but it's higher than it was last time. So, communication, the work climate, the work environment, benefits, advancement are all higher on this survey than on the last survey. So that's fairly significant. Now let's kind of break it down a little more and take a look at the items that were least favorable. Doesn't mean they weren't favorable, just means they were least favorable. So, number one on that list, tied with the second one, poor performance at the county is addressed in a timely manner. Still more towards the positive side, but concerns. My department section is adequately staffed. So apparently there's a couple of areas that feel like maybe they could use a little help. My chances for advancement look good in the next few years. And that's one of those things where we don't know if there's not a career path for people or if they don't understand how career paths work. So that's an area for both communication and maybe some development. Occasionally I think about quitting my job here, 3.23. The way pay raises are determined is reasonable. I'm paid what my job is worth, somewhat positive. Satisfied with the pay for the work I do, again, 3.38. Communication between my department, other departments is effective, 3.42. Work-related personal problems are solved in a timely manner. And the county promotes those who have earned it. So a general belief that the county's pretty fair in the way it approaches, even though there's some questions about how advancement is done. If we look at the most favorable items, things people felt really, so from the overall survey, these are the things that were least favorable and the things that are most favorable. I'm proud to tell others I work for the county. I would recommend Pitkin to others as a good place to work. My supervisor supports my training and development goals. My relationship with my coworkers is good, it's positive. I feel loyal to the county. I have the freedom to use my own judgment on the job. Opportunities to reduce my total commuting time are important to me. Now, that is kind of a backwards one in that it scores very high as positive, but also it's something they want to improve on. So, motivated to do my best work, scores high. Flexible work schedule is important to me, scores high. I understand why my job is important to the county. And that's one of those things where psychologists tell us that for work satisfaction, it's very important to feel like your work matters, it has some meaning to it, and that's a real good sign there. So, and my supervisor trusts me to get my work done. So any questions so far, any concerns?
Just on your when you pointed out the opportunities to reduce my total. Opportunities to reduce my total commuting time are important to me. It does seem like a backward question.
It is.
And what we're trying to get at is
that they have to commute would be negatively. It just seems like a strange way to frame a question in this survey.
It is. It just shows up as a positive because it has the highest positive score, but it is an area of concern. The joke was, is there a helicopter in next year's budget? But the real fact of it, being from Denver, I was surprised when I drove in from Basalt this morning. I thought, goodness gracious, your traffic's as bad as mine.
It's all over the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it really, there's that bottle. Once you hit the airport, you're done.
Right. Yep. Get in line. Yeah.
Yep. So I think that's an area of concern, and I don't know.
I was just thinking on that one, really, that when I hear about reducing commuting time, I also think that it could be, alternates. We have alternates to get here, buses and all that, but we also do a certain amount of telecommuting now, where a certain number of days a week, I think a day a week, people can telecommute. And it would be interesting to see how that favors, if that's a satisfying experience.
That's for some departments, not all departments.
Not all, right.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things where there was a discussion a little bit this morning of, because not everybody can telecommute, there are certain jobs that just don't have that opportunity. There may be just a little bit of jealousy.
Well, what I think is interesting is, and I can understand, is all the concerns about pay, but then they say their benefits are good. So, I mean, that's kind of a conundrum, because compensation and benefits and pay, and there's such a value to the benefits, and so it's a trade-off. So we pay you more, we have to reduce, because there's a thing called a budget, and that makes it very difficult. And I think, and it's also interesting to see that, one of the somewhat positive was the compensation, which is, my question was, benefits and pay, or just benefits, or just pay? Because to me, compensation includes benefits. John, can you?
Yeah, and I think
tough one.
probably, it was asked separately in the survey, and I think most employees look at it separately as distinct items, but you're right, we try and look at it as a total compensation kind of formula, that's inclusive of salary and the benefits and retirement and what have you. And so that's an ongoing conversation. I think it's my guess is in your book of business, it is not uncommon for this response to be this way for almost every organization. So
I've never seen an organization that scored a 5 on compensation. It's always a whole lot closer to 3 than 5. It's funny how we always think there ought to be a little bit more in there for us somewhere. But overall, your folks are very satisfied. They're proud to work here. They do think the benefits are good. They'd like to make more money, which is odd. They'd like to make more money, but they also think the compensation is good.
Yeah.
So it's one of those, it'd be nice to have that, but we'd all like to have a bigger budget. So. Yeah.
Well, I just think that, staff needs to know that has nothing to do with the persons who, provide the benefits and it comes down to the county, the Board of Commissioners, when it comes down to budget at the end of the day.
And I think as you look at this, the improvements over the last survey, and we'll get to a comparison to other people that have taken the survey, you'll find that you're scoring very well. So it's all good news with any of the I'm not going to say negatives, but any of the least scoring are things to look at, but they're not bad. They're just less good.
Now, have the questions for this survey been custom tailored to this staff, or is this something you give in order to have a way to compare it? Have to be the same.
So what we have, when folks call us and say we'd like to do a engagement or opinion survey, we have a set of, I believe it's 63 questions that are standard. And now you don't have to use all those, but you can.
Okay.
We have what's called normative data for all of those. Those are ones that have been used enough by our different members that we can tell you how you score against other folks. We also have an additional list of optional questions, around 70. We don't have enough data yet on those to feel comfortable saying, here's how you compare to somebody else. Got it. And if you'd like to add your own questions, but I think pretty much this was just the standard questionnaire, what you used last time. Right.
We have a custom health and well-being questions.
Okay, so the health and well-being, we're custom to you, but the rest we're good.
Got it.
So
great.
Then we have some open-ended questions. Oh, excuse,
There's one page in the middle. What
I'm
was it?
wrong way.
Question
There we
themes.
go. What do you like about working for the county? And to your point, number one is benefits.
That's ironic.
Yeah. The work the employees do. Again, people feel like they're providing value, that their job has meaning, that it helps other folks have a better life. So, things that please me. Coworkers. I enjoy my coworkers. I like who I work with. And I like supporting the community. So, and again, we find higher engagement when people believe there's a mission involved than just making money. So that's good. Now, some of the things that particularly bother you: low pay, lack of accountability, need for more affordable housing to reduce commute, and favoritism regarding workloads and promotions. And one of the things that I talked to John about this morning is that these are open-ended questions. So keep in mind that when we look at the bar graphs, those are sums of all of the participants. Not everybody wrote a comment. So that you may have a much smaller sample set here of maybe one or two people said something like this, right? So I always look at this and go, okay, an area to pay attention to, but I want to look at the overall totals to see if there was a general feeling that the pay was low, and there wasn't. There was a concern about pay, but nobody felt like they were being underpaid, except somebody that made this one comment. So,
Got it. Thank you for that.
yeah. Yeah, it's easy to say, well, gee, it doesn't jive with the rest of what's going on. And it's because you get a much smaller sample set of people that take the time to write out stuff. And if they write it out, usually that means they're motivated about something. So, health and well-being questions, and these were the unique ones. Employees want to learn about financial well-being, want to learn about retirement, and want to learn about stress management. And I was told that there's some ongoing stress management stuff. And so it's just making sure everybody gets to take advantage of it. The three top health and well-being goals were to increase physical activity, reduce stress, and improve financial well-being. So, and I really enjoy the responses to this one. So, what's the most important thing you'd like
Chair
to see?
massages.
Yeah.
I'm going chair massages, sure, why not? Because I already saw the dog, we can bring our dogs to work, so.
Commissioners can give chair massages on Thursdays.
Can get that.
I was going to say get or give.
What
Yeah,
did I say?
Do you know about our yoga program we have with the gentleman out at Public Works?
No, I do not. That's great.
That's really cool.
Oh, that is cool.
When you have our heavy equipment operators out there doing yoga, it's pretty special.
It's a power break, Patty.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
I think it's pretty cool.
It is cool. So, anyway, they were saying, in an ideal world, it'd be great to have some discounts or a place to work out. Flexible work schedules, which I think is already in place, but again, not applicable to all departments at all times. Chair massages, interesting line item on the next budget, right? And then allow more time for exercises during working hours.
So we actually did have a program where that came from, where we had students in massage programs who would come through and provide short chair massages for
And come to our
stress relief,
picnic.
and that was and to our picnic, and so that was happening down Basalt. I don't know, that hasn't happened here yet?
No, but it is.
Okay.
Yes.
So
It's in the works.
it's actually, I know you're getting a kick out of it, but it's a thing.
That's way cool. So,
The one thing is on this, the facility to work out in is the outdoors, right?
I was
So
gonna
if they
say
have
you're-
more time for exercise during working hours, then the facility's right here.
And stairs. Don't take
And
the
we've got
elevator.
plenty of stairs, yeah.
yeah, so.
For indoor.
Well, and the idea of, gym memberships, I know some people take advantage of them, but usually has a pretty sharp attrition rate after the first few months. So it sounds like a great benefit, but turns out it is not as used as.
I think we have pretty good use.
Do you?
We have a membership you can apply a health credit to a membership of, a certain amount of.
We get reduced rates at Jean Robert's, I thought, or someplace.
Yeah, there are a few gyms that have reached out. I can't remember which
And usually
ones
because of
right
the
now.
chamber, our association with the Aspen Chamber.
Yeah, we do have a number of collaborations with fitness centers and gyms.
You need to be on a
We have to
mic.
give you a mic if you're gonna chime in. I need to put you on a mic.
Oh, okay, good.
If there,
I need to come to more BOCC meetings.
okay, all right, let's keep going.
Good. So, open-ended questions. What could Pitkin County do? A little more flexibility, remote work, reduced commute times. I feel like they do have enough work-life balance. So again, you're seeing on these individual responses, these open-ended questions, people that have a unique kind of issue they want to bring up, they're motivated to bring up. And so it's one of those things where people that are happy and satisfied may not feel the need to make a comment. So, and good themes here. Please share any additional comments. Number one, Pitkin County is a great place to work. So, comments regarding a perception of unfairness. So what they did is they summarized more than one comment here. And so again, usually that's a couple of things. It's possible there's some unfairness, but it's more likely there's just not as much communication as could be about how transfers occur, about how work assignments occur. Sometimes there's a tendency to believe the grass really is greener in that department. And so part of that is just kind of thinking through how can we explain that better. So, questions or comments?
No.
For the whole, or on any page, or I'll wait till you're done and then I have one.
Okay.
In
So,
summary.
this is that normative data I mentioned earlier, which is how do you score compared to other members that have taken this? And it's quite a large sample. Working conditions, oh goodness, fairly close, slightly behind. There we go. So, if you look at the rest of them, Pitkin County is ahead, except for empowerment. So, out of all of the areas we looked at, you score above, with the exception of these two areas, all the other members have taken this survey, and that would be in the thousands. So, what it's telling me is that, one, the county is doing a good job as an employer, and two, because of the delta, the change between the last survey and this survey, that the employees believe the survey was valuable and it was acted upon. That people listened to what came out of the last survey, did something with it, improved the conditions. So same thing here. So the overall news is good, that people enjoy, believe it's valuable to work for the county.
And once again, neutral would be less than 3,
Right.
Or about 3. So
Yeah.
we're in the positive.
Yeah.
Got it. Just looking at the working conditions, I was trying to figure out, well, does working conditions mean we need a new building, or does it mean is it the climate? The climate and the working conditions, which is which, and what does that mean?
Yeah, and that's one where breaking it down by department might be really interesting. So your bridge crew may have a different belief about working conditions as the administrative staff.
Right. Sure.
Yeah, so it's just, that's one of the things where you could do a breakout.
I could pop in and answer that. So some of the questions under working conditions are the flow of work in my department or section is properly planned or organized. The county shows concern for the safety of its employees. My work area is ergonomically well designed. So things around the actual working conditions.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have a question on the, well, I'll wait because it's on next steps. I'm still jumping ahead.
And the arrow, the green arrows, I assume show that we've improved since the last survey. Is that what you said? I wasn't sure I heard that. All right.
So next steps, Again, need to celebrate. Your score is up, and you've done very well. But I always tell people, great, you've done really good. It's like you just won the last playoff game. But now you have to go get ready for the next game, right? So enjoy it for 5 minutes and then start to work again. And then, of course, the team has a plan of how they're going to implement the next set of changes, evaluate what makes the most sense, kind of a where can I get the most bang for my buck type thing. So.
And I would just add, so we had a joint meeting of the E team and AIM team, so that's kind of our section leader group and managers to go over the results of the survey. And what we're going to do is have the AIM team, in this case, take a deeper dive. And similar to what we did last time, there's always a whole lot of things you can focus on, but we typically don't have the time or resources to do that well. And so we're going to ask the AIM team to, kind of go through the survey results and prioritize what are the areas that you want us to work on next. Last time, that's how we got to the changes in our leave program and the well-being program and our onboarding. So what's that next set of items that we can take on for improvement? And so we're going to let that come up through the organization and identify some of those areas. We can bring that back as we do with the board. The other thing that's going to happen is we do have department-specific results, and so HR is also going to be following up with departmental conversations because there could be issues or things identified in the survey that are specific to departments that may not show up in the overall organization. So we want to have those discussions and see if there are some specific departmental efforts that need to take place. And then finally, I'd add, related to kind of the concerns in here about promotions and those sorts of things, we have started a succession planning effort. We have brought in a consultant, Patrick Ibera, who's doing a lot of survey work right now in the organization and will be helping us develop a succession planning model. And succession planning in this case isn't what you traditionally think of, which is kind of having an org chart and who's going to fill what boxes when and which ones are going to empty out. Instead, it's really taking a look at our culture and having kind of training and development programs in place so that we strengthen our overall bench, so that there are folks who can step up maybe within their department or even somewhere else in the county. And so we're really trying to identify those kind of training and development opportunities and creating some clearer pathways about how advancement occurs in the county. So that's kind of our follow-up steps right now.
I have a question as to HR will follow up directors on department-specific results.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure we're very careful about not breaching any anonymity of employees.
Yeah.
I don't want it to come out that there was one person in this department who, I just think I want the county's employees to be really safe about participating in these informative surveys. So I think we need to be very, very careful on that.
And that came up this morning also.
I want to make sure we're protective of those people.
When we had a group of 5 or less in a department, they were merged with another group, so to protect the anonymity, so that there's no group that was 5 or less.
Yeah, but this says specific results, and so I want to make sure that we go to a specific department for specific results. We're careful about that.
Yeah. No, that's on our radar screen for sure.
Thank you. Okay. Good stuff.
It's good to know.
I think I want to work here.
Yeah, so the last time we did this, we didn't present it, the results to the board. The board had asked, well, gosh, we would have been kind of interested in hearing this. So that's part of the reason we brought it back to you.
Thank you. Now, so what's the celebration? Are you going to follow through on that promise?
We're having a picnic coming up, aren't we?
When's the party?
We do have a employee picnic coming up on July 16th. See, I'm really bad with the party side. I'm bad at that celebration.
Just so everyone knows,
side.
we did a
But we are
survey, and
having
Mr.
one.
Peacock is not planning the party.
But we'll be getting that announcement
I've
out.
noticed
so.
that ComDev has a birthday practically every day, it seems. And there's always a cake in there, so.
Well, they
if
have
you
a
feel need to
birthday cake.
celebrate,
I don't know
just
if they
stop
have a
by.
birthday.
Yeah, but finance has a potluck every month.
Yeah.
See, I didn't know about that one.
God, where have you been? You have to hang out in finance.
I think they disinvited me last time.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
There we go.
That's it for me. Anything else? We're good. Thanks for coming.
Good.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much. Thanks,
Pleasure to meet you.
appreciate it.
It's interesting stuff. Good to know we're on track.
Lois, will you let the airport folks know we're probably gonna be running around?
Yeah, so we're half an hour ahead here. Can we
Let's keep moving.
skip to
Well, we can probably go on to the
Prep?
upcoming meetings.
future agendas, upcoming?
No, we
meetings?
have prep for upcoming joint meetings.
Yeah, that's coming. I just want. But who's here?
John's
I
doing
think
it.
I can do
It's
that
just
one.
you. Oh, it's just you. Oh.
I can do it. It's just me.
Okay, prep for upcoming joint meetings.
And
with already
this
one
is
school
probably
district.
not going to take that long. So we have our joint meeting coming up with the school district. There were two items that the board had previously talked about. We were going to do a tour of the Basalt Vista housing project together. And then Patty, you had asked for just a brief discussion, kind of update about how the counseling services
Is
at
working.
the high school, I think in particular.
High school, middle.
Yeah, I think it covers all
Yeah.
the schools actually. Was working for the school district, and so we thought that could even be part of the walk along.
Okay, and so
update.
it's just a walking meeting?
What I guess it will be a
Okay.
little bit of a walking meeting. We also were going to try and fit in either before or after that an opportunity if you wanted to drop in and see the south side.
Since we haven't seen that.
Yeah, since you haven't seen that facility and you can see the meeting. Oh, we have an update.
Email about another item, which is something we're working on, just to kind of let you know in case it gets brought up. The school district has been providing Wi-Fi to some of the mobile home parks within their district, and it turns out that one of our sites where we're doing broadband is a site that they would like to somehow figure out access to be able to provide service. So that may be an item that gets brought up, and I didn't want I haven't heard from the school board, and I didn't think you were aware of it, so I wanted to
So they're doing
just-
that just to enable so that the students that live in those parks have access, because I know that's a huge issue across the country.
And part of it's because they all work off of Chromebooks, so the schools provide the students with Chromebooks. You can't use a Chromebook unless you are on the internet.
Yeah.
So when they go home, it's not restricted to the students, they just provide it within a park. So as I understand their infrastructure, they would put up an antenna within a park so that it's just provided there.
That's great.
Yeah, so that may be too much for a walking meeting, so we'll work on the logistics for that.
And I'll see, but I just didn't want, if a school board member asked a board member about it, I didn't want you
To
to
not know about
be
it.
surprised.
Is it an easy solution with line of sight or any of those issues?
Yeah, they have to be close to it, but they need to get it from somewhere. So
Right.
the getting,
It's
the
not-
middle mile part
Where's our mountaintop?
would be Picken County. It would be Crown, which services the mobile home park that's there in Basalt, and also the one in Algebel,
Okay.
which is a really big, the Crawford Park.
Perfect. I'm glad you
So
let
they
us
did
know.
a
That's
pilot
great.
in Glenwood, and it worked out really
So
successful.
it's about putting in the final mile tower.
Yeah, they would provide that part, but they need to be connected somehow. So I don't even know that it's at a point where we need to discuss it. I just didn't want you to get surprised by somebody asking you
Thank you.
a question.
Well, it's great.
We like
And
to
I
look
just got the email this morning, so it was, while I'm sitting here.
We
Good
like to
timing.
look educated when we're talking with the school board.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that, just jumping in.
No, thank you.
problem. You're
No,
welcome.
appreciate it.
So Town of Basalt, we had originally set up for kind of an update on the river park. But we hadn't talked about whether there are other agenda items that the board might.
This Town of Basalt.
Housing well, I guess we can't talk about it, can we? Their housing opportunity there in Old Snowmass?
Well, they've sold that, is
The
my
school,
understanding.
Basalt did. They sold it to the school?
I believe to Skiko.
Oh, just, really?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe that's been sold though.
Okay.
So.
I don't know of anything else. George, do you know of anything?
No, I won't be there, so.
What about,
we can talk
is there an
without you.
opportunity to talk about Mountain Family Health for any reason with Town of Basalt or?
We
explain
could
how things are-
certainly provide an update on where we're at. I think the town is at least aware, you know, because we got all our permitting and such through them, but be happy to provide a overview of that partnership. I'm trying to remember if I can't remember if we did that in a previous meeting or not, so we'll go back and look.
I don't remember.
They were there at the opening, weren't they? Didn't they have a
think they
presence
had
at
a
the
presence
opening?
there.
Yeah, yeah.
Be good to have a follow-up, because I know Mountain Family Health is still pushing toward their final
Fundraising for,
closeout and fundraising, right?
Okay. We'll check with them too. They may have some.
yeah, I'm sure they'll have something.
Regarding the schools, I'd love to just hear what they're doing when we're doing our walkthrough. I'd love to hear what they're doing with their mental health programs in the school.
That's part of the counseling.
That'd be the counseling, yeah.
Okay, so it's already on here?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right, and that's that. That was quick.
I know, we're gonna be way ahead
Dan
here.
Drigger's arrived in lickety split, seeing how fast we're moving.
She heard me mention their potluck. She heard you say you want to be invited to their potluck. That's what she
Were you
heard.
the one on that survey who said we need more gym facilities?
No, I wasn't.
I didn't think you were.
No, I think exercise outdoors is a lot better than.
That's why I asked.
She actually lives outdoors more than she does indoors.
There's a gym right there.
I checked my Facebook anytime and whenever I check it, you're on top of a mountain photographing the stars. I'm so envious.
And I'm home watching it, being worried about her human health safety.
Yeah. Well, that's good. All you need is a tent, right? Are we
I
ready?
think we're ready for
We're
you.
ready.
If you
You're
wanna
ready?
come up,
Great.
we're ready early.
Come on up.
I just canceled my credit card. Somebody just found it.
Don't hate that.
We're on to the exciting stuff.
Hi.
Right.
It's all yours.
Okay. And ready, set, go. Who is our guest today?
I don't know.
Just you.
Anne Driggers, Finance Director, Treasurer, and Public Trustee. Okay. I'm here today to discuss.
Oh, turn your mic on. Make
Oh.
sure it's on. Red light.
Red light.
Bing.
Okay, start over. Take two. We're going to go take two on
Okay.
that. Okay, action.
Anne Driggers, Finance Director, Treasurer, Public Trustee. I'm here today to talk to you about our use tax again. We would like to modify the procedures we have for collecting use tax. The reason being is that the state has made some recent changes in its laws governing collection of sales tax, and it has a sort of play on our use tax collections. So I'll start at the beginning, and back in 1993, the electorate approved a half-cent use tax on building materials that are used in Pitkin County. This is when materials are imported into Pitkin County, and so therefore sales tax does not apply at the point of sale in the past. And we collect the use tax somewhat upfront by calculating a deposit, which is 50% of the total construction cost, and then applying the half-cent sales tax to that 50%. 50% is derived kind of as a national standard or average that is typically used for kind of these kinds of calculations. And we've mentioned this before when I talked use tax with you, but typically we see the materials cost being slightly less than 50% because we have more labor costs, or the labor costs typically are a little higher here. So that's kind of one of the reasons, but not the major one, but it sort of addresses that issue as well that we want to change. So back in the last week of May, the governor signed legislation to enforce the collection of sales tax on goods that are delivered to another county. So it requires that previously where they did not have to pay sales tax and only a use tax would apply, the sales tax is now collected at the point of sale, but it's the sales tax for Pitkin County. And it's taken a while for this to actually take effect because the state of Colorado has one of the most complex sales tax systems around, and so to figure out how to kind of collect it from all of the different businesses in Colorado and those outside of Colorado was a big thing. But they finally came down with the legislation, signed into law last week on the 23rd of May, and it's in effect on June 1st. So as of yesterday.
So how does that work practically? Say you go to Boulder and you buy a load of lumber.
Mm-hmm.
People in the lumber store have to determine where you're going to be building whatever the structure is with that lumber as they sell it to you.
If they deliver
it, then they have to calculate the sales tax due at the location of delivery. If you're going to take it with you and not have it delivered, then you pay the sales tax at the location of the sale.
But what gets me is, having worked in a small retail, how are you going to be able to know what the sales tax is? I'm going to send something to, Springfield in BOCC County. How do I know what their sales tax is? And how do I then get the money I would be charging that consumer to BOCC County?
Well, so first of all, to address your last point, the state collects all sales tax on behalf of all counties and then distributes it. So the vendor or the business just has to submit one sum of money each month essentially to the state, and then they figure out who gets which.
But I'd have to put in my summary that I sent X amount of dollars to BOCC, X amount of dollars to Yuma, That's
so
huge process.
Part of the, and I actually met with the Department of Revenue people yesterday. Right now, they have, this law is in place for businesses that have over $100,000 in annual sales. Those that have less than $100,000 in annual sales do origin sourcing tax collections. So they just collect the taxes as though the product wasn't being delivered. It was just being sold to somebody within their location of sale. That will all change when the state actually has a system in place that they can give to everybody to use. And they're currently building that software. It's a database that's using assessor information. Jeez. And they estimate it's going to take 2 to 3 years to build and get certified. And then once that system is in place, every person who is making a sale in Colorado or to Colorado will have to use the system in order to determine the sales tax.
Because one of the places I work has an antiquated cash register.
Right.
That only has a sales tax or a no sales tax button. It doesn't have a, you'd have to hand calculate, and it's, glad I just worked there.
Yeah. George, question?
Yeah, 2 questions. The sales tax in some respect will replace a user tax at some level?
Correct. And that's why we're here to modify the procedures.
And in your memo, it says that the majority of building materials, which approximately 90% are delivered by the retailer to locations in Pitkin County, then the business is required to collect Pickens County sales tax on those materials. In this case, the use tax does not apply. So for, let's say for a contractor, because that's where we're getting most of the
Correct.
materials coming in. So the contractor who ordered materials outside the county, even if it's Valley Lumber,
Correct.
they will pay the sales tax, but then they won't be having to pay a user's tax.
Correct. Not on those items that were delivered. And our use tax deposit is calculated based upon that there would be no sales tax paid at all. And so we're wanting to reduce the deposit to a level that we think might reflect what's going to be the case in the future. But right now it's the 4th of June, and this law has been in effect for 1 day essentially. So we're not really sure. We've reduced it to what we think makes sense right now, but we may want to adjust it again in the next month or two as we see how things go.
So it won't be the case where the contractor's going to get double billed at all?
No. Well, and
Well, if we don't reduce the deposit, and that's why we're here today, our concern is that, yes, in fact, they will be double billed, except that we would, provide a refund on the deposit once they could demonstrate the tax. But they're having to pay potentially twice up front. So we're trying to reduce the deposit to a level that we think is reasonable given the information we have today. I think this information is going to evolve a lot over time.
Right.
Yeah. And then sort of one of the impacts of this, how it's going to affect the EOTC budget.
That was my next question.
Because I forget how much of that budget comes in from user tax and how, so that's going to be an issue for EOTC.
It's going to be an issue for the EOTC. It's something that we're on top of and having conversations about right now. And we have analysis, but it's speculative at this point because we don't have real numbers yet about Department of Revenue collections of sales tax on the construction materials versus use tax. Those reports generally come in about 2 months after the month of collection. So we're going to be in August before we have our first real run of data to start working with. Our speculation and analysis is that the use tax is going to go down quite a bit, but there's also a portion of sales tax that goes in that's going to go up. Part of the use tax is derived from motor vehicles. That should not change.
It's not changing, yeah.
And so we're working on that. We're going to work on that with our municipal staff partners coming up over the next couple weeks. So we'll be bringing an analysis back to all of the EOTC members. But yes, it is going to have an impact. What we don't know is what the scale of that impact is. And because we don't know that, we don't have any recommendations yet on a proper response.
And then since the retailer, let's say the contractor is going to be paying the sales tax, how will that affect the way we distribute our portion of our sales taxes to the municipalities?
It's exactly the same.
Doesn't change.
Exactly the same.
Yep.
Just more.
Yeah, what we're anticipating.
Because they may be the beneficiary more than the county then.
No.
Because the county's going to get less user tax. Sales taxes will go up.
I would argue the other way around. Yes, the use tax is completely a county tax, but we give 100% of it to the EOTC. The sales tax is divided into, general fund revenues, transit revenues, and then of course our share back to the municipalities. The sales tax rate right now in Pickens County is 2%. We're one of the, well, it's more than 2%, but our general
3.6.
3.6%. The use tax rate is 0.5%. So the overall pool of revenues, if you're collecting it on sales tax versus use tax, should be higher.
Okay.
But it's going to, the issue really is it's going to be distributed differently, so we'll need to figure out if and how we want to deal with that change in distribution.
Okay.
Yeah.
But this is not just limited to construction materials,
Correct.
is it?
It's
It's
internet
anything.
sales. So when we did our 2020 is coming up, our 2019 budget, we knew that this law had been, was in the works. We did not know how it was going to be implemented. And we had real concerns, particularly me, about Department of Revenue's ability to implement the law. And so it covers internet sales. It really covers all sales, that are delivered into the county. So that's going to be your Amazons, there are 8,000 vendors that are registered.
Yeah, just under 8,000 vendors are already registered with the state from out of state.
Right. So we're potentially going to be seeing increases in collections from that. It appears that the state really, and Ann can elaborate on this, but the state's making investments to build their capacity. And so we're anticipating that this will be a significant change. I'm hesitating throwing out any numbers right now because we just don't know the magnitude of the change. I think it's going to be a net benefit, though.
So the question then would be, if I was to purchase a Rolex in town and ship it to Yuma County, I would pay the sales tax to Yuma County, because that's where it was.
If
being
you're a
shipped.
business, yeah.
Right, if I was a
Yeah.
business, I'm talking as a business owner. I wouldn't pay the 3.6 of Pitkin, I'd pay the
Correct.
0.2 of Yuma, whatever theirs
Yep.
is. And right now, that's being kind of totally avoided.
Right, there's no sales tax paid for
No
county.
No county sales tax, there's a state,
Just a state, only the one that's in common.
right.
So right now, or up until recently, you could always, like if I live in unincorporated Garfield County, I bought a fridge at Lowe's, they delivered it, then I would only pay Colorado's sales tax. I wouldn't have to pay Glenwood Springs, where they are, and I wouldn't have to pay
Glenwood,
Garfield
Garfield
County.
Now
or
you'll have to pay Garfield County.
Garfield County.
Interesting. I think it's appropriate to people, because we've been a lot of avoidance of paying sales tax. Some of it legal and some of it not so legal.
And I think the net result is going to be we're going to see increases, and I'd even say potentially significant increases in sales tax collections. We will also, I think, see more volatility as a result, more elasticity in that revenue source, because now when you're adding the construction materials and such, they tend to fluctuate a lot more, just like our building permit revenues do. So it's going to be an interesting planning year coming up. But I don't know, Ann, if you want to comment on the investments that Department of Revenue is making to ensure more accurate collections. This was, I think, good news.
Yeah. So yesterday I went over to CCI just for the afternoon to meet with the Department of Revenue there and Jeannie's sort of quarterly sales tax meeting. And they said the Department of Revenue had, they have got secured $10 million for building this software, which is based on GIS from the assessors of each of the counties that would help the businesses figure out where they needed to collect sales tax. And then they're also adding 14 FTE from starting July this year for their next fiscal year to help with the enforcement. So that's kind of a significant increase over, I think, they just have one person right now. So,
Wow.
yeah.
We're finding them these days.
Yeah,
So they're anticipating that this is a big deal.
Right.
Also.
So as it relates to the the use tax deposit that we're collecting, we want to reduce the amount of that deposit so contractors and homeowners aren't being double taxed, which is not correct either. So just to pay based upon what sort of our conversations right now, we think 10% down from 50% would be an appropriate place to start, and we'll just have to evaluate as we go, and we may be back to you to change that as soon as we have more information. I did have one thought about what to do with those people who last week came in for and paid a use tax deposit, and basically for their entire project they're going to be paying sales tax. And as you may know, at the end of the project, when a homeowner or a contractor has been issued a CO, we have a reconciliation done. So, and then we refund or they pay additional, whichever is the case. It's usually a refund because of that extra labor costs that they have. I was thinking that if we sent a letter to all of those people that had already paid a use tax deposit and asked them to do if they wish to do a reconciliation as of May 31st, and then we would refund them up to that point, because after that they'll be paying sales tax.
Rather than double dipping on them.
Yeah.
That's
So
fair.
it seemed like that was the best sort of scenario I could come up with. Valerie says she's not sure how excited they will be at doing 2 reconciliations, but I'm like, if you want your deposit back, I guess
Give them the
that's the
option.
way you're gonna
But,
do it.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm still a little confused. What would be the purpose of having the use tax now if everything's going to be collected via the sales tax?
Well, that's going to be another conversation coming up, and that's why we wanted to first see how does this play out in reality. You know, how does the how do the sales tax collections actually affect the use tax collections? Because I think you're right, George, that in theory the use tax collections will drop precipitously. I don't think they'll be eliminated necessarily, because you still have out of state, you still have other kind of use tax collections, but the question will be, will they be at a level where the expense of collecting them and tracking them actually exceeds the cost or the benefit of collecting it.
Costing
So
us more to get.
we have all of that on our mind. We have the exact same questions, but I think we want to get some real data under our belt and just see how this plays out, because I think everyone right now is kind of guessing, because that's the level of data that we have. But it may be, if use tax were to drop, into the, 6 figures from where it is now, or low 6 figures, that may be a conversation that we need to have as to whether that is the right revenue source to support transportation going forward.
And we still collect though from the vehicle registration.
Yeah, but and the motor vehicle piece that will be constant. That shouldn't be affected by this.
There's no change in that. And, of course, for the EOTC, that's the sales and use tax fund, and so there will be a portion of the sales tax that we will now collect that does go into that fund.
Yeah,
so that portion is potentially going to go up as use tax goes down. What's different about us from any other jurisdiction is everyone else's use tax generally matches their sales tax rate and generally goes the same place as their sales tax. We, of course, do it differently. So that will be that'll be the conversation. But we kind of wanted to hold off on bringing you decision points there. We wanted to start working with our counterparts in the municipalities, get us all on the same page, and then track the data going into the fall, and then come back with recommendations once we see where this is actually headed.
I think when we're at the point of, in the budgeting for 2020, we'll have more data, so and that's the appropriate time, I think, to start talking numbers.
So that'll be a big conversation during the EOTC budgets and during the county budgets.
Dan, I'd love to hear your opinion on how all this is going to go with the state. It sounds as if they've they're changing it dramatically. Will it be simpler when it's done, or is it just going to be much more
No, there's nothing
complicated?
simple about state
Yeah,
sales tax collection. I mean, Colorado is one of the most complicated sales tax states.
So this is more automated then?
I think
Or,
it's- I think
what
there's
are they-
gonna be some big
What's the end
hurdles.
result that's,
Well, I think with this software, this database, every vendor in Colorado or making a sale to Colorado would have that at their fingertips, so they could just put in the address and it would tell them exactly what sales tax needs to be collected.
But they have to have something to put it into in there. Some people don't
Yeah,
have that technology. Yeah.
I'm not sure how it's
Gonna
all
be
going to work
interesting.
out. Yeah.
well, yeah, it seems very complicated and expensive and
Yeah.
requiring a 14-fold increase in their FTEs. In that department, right?
Yeah.
But the user tax was not that clean either.
Yeah.
It was very labor intensive, and the fact that it was different, it's a different percentage than the sales tax, has equity issues and
Yeah.
When we were talking about this, when we were doing budget development, there were bills being requested to provide additional funding to Department of Revenue and those weren't doing well at the time. And so this thing has evolved really quickly and is changing really quickly. So, but the investment, I think, in an information technology system and staff is probably going to improve the accuracy of collections. I don't know how much simpler it's going to make it for folks on the other side. It's just a complicated system. And to your point, Patty, I do think it's a burden on businesses.
Gonna be a tough one for some of those smaller businesses.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why they did the origin
Yeah.
law for those smaller ones.
$100,000 or less.
It's
But
not
what
much.
happens if your profit's only been 55,000 and that year at the very end of the year you have a huge sale and you bid 100,000 and you haven't been doing it all year?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Cash and
Well, you can't make it. It can't be retroactive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause you can't
So
go back
you
and
just
make
need to
people
make
pay.
sure that the big sale is always right in December.
The beginning, either that or
Yeah.
you can't tell anybody you made a big sale.
It'd be interesting to see how people modify their behavior.
Or you discourage the big sale. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hold it till
But
next year.
is the board, our interim step right now, we think it's the right thing to do based on the information we have to reduce that deposit that we're taking and work with our partners to
I think it's
do
fair to
that.
allow people the opportunity to reconcile to June 1st or
Yeah,
May 31st.
May
And then
31st.
they choose not to, they choose not to. If they choose to, then we'll work with
They'll
it.
reconcile anyway, so that it will happen at some point in the process.
Well, yeah, this
right?
They
True,
have to
but
do it twice.
I'm saying they would have to do it twice.
Correct. If they want the cash back
want it.
earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, hopefully everybody's going to know about it very soon. As soon as it hits the.
I think, well, I mean, that's how we started to learn about it, was because the contractors already know about
They
it.
already know about
Because
it, right?
although it wasn't required, there was a grace period for the first 6 months of this year, but some of the national retailers were already starting to implement.
Right.
And so they've already been paying the 3.6.
Got it.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann.
All right. Who's up next? It looks as if we've got
Future agendas.
future agendas up. I see David there, so I keep thinking, gee, are we skipping ahead to him already?
Oh, here for
coming in
the
for
use
this
tax
discussion.
piece.
He's here for use tax.
For exactly reasons George was
yeah.
bringing up.
Okay. Future agendas.
Yeah, so just a couple of things. The ambulance site visit, we had to reschedule to make room, but we have not rescheduled it yet. But I know there's some interest.
I thought we were canceling it and I was gonna do my own site visit.
That's you weren't here, were you? You were out of town.
Oh, I may have been out of town for that. I saw that it dropped off. Was there interest among the board in having a tour?
I was thinking not much. Patty wanted to go check it out. But we were thinking,
well, if we can do that, we'll get it scheduled.
Push it off a little bit.
Yeah, because if Patty sneaks in without a hard hat, it's a problem.
I have my own hard hat.
So
Travel with
Patty,
it.
you're the only one that we can get that set up. So there wasn't a
just
general
let
interest
me
in the
know.
whole board.
Let me know what happens. It didn't seem, nobody thought it was really necessary yet. That's the impression that I got.
Oh, okay. I missed that conversation. I thought it was a
If Patty's going to
scheduling
go and you're setting something up and I'm around, I'll certainly go, but
Okay.
that's where we left it. So it didn't.
Well, we'll work with that. We'll let you guys know if we have more than 2 of you. We'll post it.
What, you mean it's not done yet?
It's not done yet, but it's getting closer. So last time I had also talked to you about trying to set up a meeting with Garfield. We've been having some challenges lining up times. And right now, Patty, this is probably a biggest concern for you.
No, it's not. The ACRA meeting is not that week, it's the following week.
It's not the 23rd?
No, it's the last Tuesday of the month.
Oh, okay.
So
Well,
do you
this
have
is
a
easy.
problem
So
with-
we are tentatively set up to meet from 10 a.m. till 12 noon with Garfield County on the morning of July 23rd. And that'd be to discuss primarily the 2 items that we had discussed. One was the broadband authority, that conversation, and then there's a conversation we had with the CORE Act, and we probably need to unpack that one a little bit more.
Okay.
That's going to be on the 23rd of July?
Yeah.
Is that what you said, John?
Yes.
So we're going to be down in Garfield County?
Yes.
So then we're going to come back up here for the rest of our meeting, or?
We'd have to have a break and come back up here. Yeah. It's a work session, so we can be flexible in how we schedule that. We may want to keep that one light.
Yeah, I just wonder if it's going to be light, is it possible that we just, I guess it doesn't matter, I was going to say meet in Basalt at our translator office?
Yeah. We could definitely do that as a work session item. We just,
How do we film it?
we probably wouldn't film that
Yeah, but
portion
it's
of the work
light, it's-
session.
Anyway, something to think about,
Rather than run up, down, up, down, up, down.
yeah.
Right,
That's
right.
all I had on future agendas.
Patty?
On 6/12, the meeting, our regular meeting, we have an ordinance releasing a restrictive covenant prohibiting commercial agricultural activities. Should that be a land use issue?
Trying to see which item.
Item
that
number
is.
5. And it says it's a first reading, public hearing set for second reading for,
Yeah, I don't think so because the covenants are generally a legislative.
well, but there's nothing
Item,
scheduled on the
but-
26th for a second read. Can we just look into that and clean that up?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Catch.
it's not making sense. Because it would just be a single read, so it shouldn't be under first read for public hearing, set for public hearing. The other one I have is on the 18th, when we're doing the notice, we're doing the Phillips Trailer Court site visit. Are we gonna notice any of the residents at Phillips if they wanted to be part of it, or, I mean, outside of just a regular public noticing?
We certainly can.
I think we probably should, because if, they may not be following our postings of our agendas, and I think they might wanna know. And anyone else that staff thinks might want to be there.
Do we have a message board for them? Do we have a bulletin board? Do we even?
Out there, I don't know, but staff would know because they've been,
An electronic
yeah.
system of some sort.
And that's all I had for future agendas. Thank you.
Okay. All right then, moving right along.
Well, since we don't have staff here,
Almost an hour.
Yeah,
ahead of
we
our
were
break.
trying to
we could do
touch
open
base.
discussion.
We could do open discussion now.
Let me
If
just
that's
get
okay.
these notes real quick.
We're still so far ahead here. Wow.
That's okay.
Kinda like that.
Can
Right.
I ask, did anyone receive a notice from the Mortons about wanting to meet with them?
Can't do it. Doesn't
I know.
matter.
I just realized that who Molly was, and they have an
Is it on
item
a
coming
land
before
use
us.
item?
I haven't received
Yeah,
anything.
I just want to see if I was the only one.
Must have been.
The only open discussion item I had for you guys was CCI did distribute they're starting their search for legislative items, and so the form was distributed. In the past, what we've done is we've kind of put the board members on notice that CCI is looking for these. We generally do a work session. I think they're looking at June 28th, having their initial submission. So we're going to look for, I guess I could have done this during future agendas, but we're going to look for a little bit of work session time between now and then for you guys to have the conversation and prioritize legislative issues. It generally works better if we don't have a whole bunch that are all priorities, but we have one, two, or three that you guys can really prioritize as a group, and then staff can write up. Generally, we don't ask you to think through all the details of the form, unless you have specific information. Once you give staff the priorities, we do an initial write-up and get it submitted, and then we'll modify those throughout the process.
So sometime before the 26th.
That's why that was distributed. We'll shoot for getting you sometime when all five of you are here to talk about those legislative priorities. Unless you want to throw some out now, we can get those on the
Why
list.
don't we usually just make you a list and give it to you and you take it from there?
Yep. That's all I had.
Can we take a break?
I think we're good.
Man, 3 of you is easy.
2:25. Yep, we go so much faster. All right, so we're going to take a break, Grassroots. How soon do we think we can get Chris Padilla?
I'm going to have to give him a call,
Yeah,
so why don't we start off
He's
at
due in an hour. We're not going to take an hour break, though.
No, we're not.
So
why don't you take 15 minutes?
we'll
Let
do
me see where he's at.
15 back at 2:45. How about that? 20-minute break. Okay, we're back with our work session, and up next are open discussion items. We have airport parking rates and fees update. Chris Padilla is here. With a guest, tell me your name.
Kevin Summers.
Kevin, thank you.
I work for Laz Parking, and we manage the parking lots at the airport.
Okay, great, thanks.
And he's got some great stories.
No doubt.
I'll save some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them we should say.
Best excuse.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
PowerPoint here, so I can get it to.
Just out of interest, where all do you have parking operations?
Actually, nationwide, it's a very big operation.
Okay.
I'm probably the lone wolf from most of our main hubs. I'm a part of the Denver office.
Okay.
So, we can get parts or backup and employees from Denver if we need it.
And so you've got the latest technology also, whatever the state of the art is, you guys probably are using it.
Totally. Yeah, we installed new equipment in August of 2017.
Okay.
Which has helped dramatically with.
But his best stories come from here, I'm sure.
No
of it.
doubt.
Pull it up.
You by any chance do the Eagle Airport?
No, we do not.
Okay.
No.
That's last airport I went through. I was just trying to remember what they were using. Okay, ready when you are.
All right. My name is Chris Padilla. I'm the airport controller, and this is
Kevin Summers.
Kevin Summers. Yeah, thanks.
So today, first.
Make sure that
Red,
one's
little
on.
red light has to be on.
Gotcha. All right, am I good? All right. First, I'd like to thank the City of Aspen for giving their input on here and the other departments of Benton County that help us with these rates and fees charges. So, first off, my PowerPoint's not moving. Okay. Okay, so the first, our agenda is really we're going to go over the parking issues. We're going to go over the goals that we want, the current pricing, the market survey that we did, the proposed rate options, and then our recommendations and any questions that you have. So first, parking issues, we have misuse happening. We have some capacity issues, as you guys have probably seen the pick and alerts going out recently. The lots are filling up lots on the weekends. The misuse, we have, it's a unique location, so, it's close to town. There people will jump on the bus, and we have some other stories. We also have some property management companies misusing the parking lots. And we also have employees that are parking in Lot A, even though we offer them free parking currently. So
Another word for misuse might be just taken advantage of. The first hour is complimentary, so with that, and then the small increment of fees for the next few hours, it's a small penalty to pay for having your car at the airport for a short amount of time.
Got it.
So our goals is we want to bring the airport up to par with the local offerings. We want to increase the parking availability. We want to decrease the misuse, increase the convenience, and that's going to cause some change in behavior. So first I'd like to just go ahead and give you an orientation of the parking lots. And let's see.
Laser pointer function.
There you go. He's got it.
Figured out.
He's got it.
You got it.
Okay.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah,
Oh.
I just had it just gave me a drop down menu.
You don't need me anymore.
Oh, we still need you. All right, so I just want to give you a heads up. This is 82, and this is Lot A. This is our short term. We call our short term. Lot B is our long term, and these two currently are employee and overflow lots. This is currently a car rental, a long term storage lot, and we are taking it back to become more employee and overflow parking to address the capacity issue.
Chris, while we're on it, what are the ones to your left from there? What are those car rental lots?
Those are car rental lots,
Correct.
yes.
These are car rental long-term storage. This is their short-term, kind of their ready return lot. So this is where you pick up your car and drop off your car when you rent it.
So on this map, we're currently seeing picking alerts saying that the parking lots are near capacity. That includes not only the long term, but it also includes the additional overflow lots that we've been able to take advantage of this year.
So Lot A and Lot B are more the point of emphasis for the Pitt County alerts. The employee lot right now is the technology in place is meant only to have it be an employee lot. Every employee has a transponder to enter and exit, and someone has to physically be out there to let them in for overflow purposes. Because we acquired that third finger that's next to the employee lot, we're going to try and implement some new machinery that'll allow it to be function as an extra lot. So a ticket receiving and scanning and credit card machine.
So if I drive out to the airport and I find that there's no spaces left in Lot B, how do I get to utilize the overflow lot?
So that's solely my responsibility. I monitor it daily, and I'm physically out there moving people into the overflow lot.
He usually shows up at 5:30 in the morning until the last flight.
So where are you stationed, though? Are you stationed outside?
Just kind of in clear view of pass or the traffic. So entrance into Lot B or entrance into the employee lot.
Okay, because that was different information than I got a few weeks ago. Because when I mentioned this to John Kenny, he said, "Oh, we need to have a messaging out there that people know that there is another alternative." But the alternative is to hunt you down.
When I've been out there, he's been standing right by the gate.
Well, I mean, I would never have known.
Of course, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so the normal path is you go to Lot A, it's full. They'll go to Lot B. The entrance and exit is right. You can't, you have to pass the entrance into the employee lot. And that's where Kevin is intercepting them. So, and we do send out the pick-in alerts, trying to encourage people to use the mass transit or, get a ride.
Yeah, well, I'll talk about that later, why that doesn't work.
Okay.
Well, I was going to add to that saying that, you could send out the Pitt County alert every day and people still come to see, and once they're there, they're there.
Right, but a lot of tourists don't get pick-in alert.
True, but a lot of tourists aren't parking in the lots
No,
either.
but it only takes one to run into a problem.
True.
Second homeowners. Anyway, I just was curious about when pick-in alert, it just doesn't take into account spaces that may be available in the new overflow lots.
Right.
Correct.
Great. That's.
But now that we've got him on TV, everybody's going to know what he looks like. That's what they're looking for.
Well, I do see the frequent travelers. I'm like, oh, it's you again. They're like, oh, yep, I'm here.
So the current plan is to put a credit card reader and scanner, one of those devices, at the new location of the former employee lot.
It also works for the transponders for the employees.
Exactly.
They can still use it, but it's overflow, but they'll be able to get in there. It's got the same sort of gate
And with
system.
that, it'll create more space, automated space.
And I also thought that we were going to capitalize on the rental car spaces for the overflow. Wasn't that the original idea, or did I miss that?
That's that third finger.
Yeah, that is it.
This is
So
this right
George, we are utilizing a lot down by the GA terminal, and Chris, I think we're off our slide there, right?
Yeah, this is actually the current empty overflow. We are currently in a car rental RFP. Within that RFP, we have switched that finger for this finger so that it's closer to the lots
So the
and it's closer to the overflow.
Oh, I see.
rental car
Okay.
would be down here and
Okay.
So that's more convenient for the passengers.
travelers.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So currently our parking rates are free for the first hour in both lots, $2 in Lot A for every hour to a max of $12. And Lot B is free for the first 60 minutes, $1 for every hour with a max of $6 a day, which is really low. Both have a $75 lost ticket fee. We looked at the market comparables and the race surveys. You can see that, downtown Aspen, if you were to park there all day or even just for the 4 hours max, you're getting close to the $24 period right there. Hotel parking, goes from $25 to $40. Snowmass Base Village at $30 a day max. Highlands, $20 for 8 hours plus. And so you can see that you're looking at pretty comparable rates. As we
And
come
$5
closer.
more on weekends and
$5
holidays.
more an hour for all of those?
So, and that's why one of the things is people parking in the parking lot and going up to Highlands. You've got the Buttermill lot, which is a unique lot. So, $6 to $40 to $3,500 for a summer storage. So our first option that we came up with, you can see where the highlights are yellow. Any yellow highlights you see are where the major or where the changes are between the options. So these were set up to be true long-term storage and long-term, short-term and long-term storage lots, so that to reflect that, you can see the 30-minute rate is the free 30-minute rate to increase the turnover in the spaces, so that people get there, pick people up, and leave, and that'll stop the misuse for any kind of funny stories that happen there. Then we don't want to ding the local person coming to pick somebody up. So if they do go over that 30 minutes, it's only $2. And then it's $4 up to 3 hours. So.
But why are we reducing the free amount of time so much for Lot B long-term? Because by the time you get in that lot and walk to the terminal, your 15 minutes is up.
So a structure of a long-term lot is usually you want to get in there, find a spot, and then leave. And so the free 15 minutes is really, we didn't want to ding anybody for going in there and not finding a spot and then being able to leave.
Well, I'm saying it should be greater period of time. I think the 15 minutes doesn't allow somebody who couldn't get into Lot A and who needed to park to, say, go pick up luggage, and Lot A is full. By the time you get into Lot B, get back to the terminal, get your luggage, your first 15 minutes is used up. I mean, it's not like it's across the street. Mm-hmm. So if anything, I would rather see that maybe go to the 30 minutes rather than 15 to give people, if not to keep it at the 60, but rather than, cut it back so far that people couldn't even get out of their car and get anywhere.
Okay.
And I think that's only fair.
No, that's a good point. From my personal experience of being out there, the Lot B the complimentary hour, it doesn't get used much at all. Right. On a daily basis, we're talking 2 to 3 tickets a day versus Lot A, where we're looking into the hundreds for pickup and drop-off purposes. So that's one of the reasons we put Lot B at 15. A lot of people will they'll pick their person up and they'll drive to get their car just to take up that walking space. So they'll go into the lot. So the idea behind the 15 minutes was they could go into the lot, drop their person off, get that car, and leave. Or if they couldn't find parking, or if they decided that they didn't want to do that. Usually people don't go to Lot B to pick up a family member. They'll go to Lot A.
Right. That's why I think 30 minutes in there wouldn't be pushing
You're right,
the
it probably
envelope.
wouldn't make much of a difference.
Yeah, I think it'd only be fair because, literally you couldn't really do much in that 15-minute window.
Okay.
If the rest of the guys.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. It seems like it's a grace period if you're change your mind or something, you've got half an hour to figure it out.
Right. One of the other thoughts behind it was it was an hour long, and then it was only $1 an hour after that. So people would park there to go on long bike rides or to go skiing, and so we wanted to treat it more like if you're leaving your car there, then we know you're flying out because it doesn't matter what's happening after that 15 minutes.
In half an hour, you're not going to get very far and back.
True. That's true.
For the free thing. So,
I appreciate that input.
Can you go over that asterisk too?
Oh yeah. So on all these, we are asking, and it was suggested by actually some different departments in Benton County that we asked for an ability from the aviation director to be able to adjust the rates by it was suggested higher. We kind of tamped it down to 25% for seasonality and for any kind of market adjustments, or if there's basically seasonality and market adjustments type things.
I'm not comfortable with that.
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
Because
too many issues come back to us, and we should be the
You'll hear
ones.
my remarks about a lot of these rates later on, but the last thing I want to do is let the director try to even adjust them further without coming back to the BOCC.
Okay.
There's the idea of demand management. It kind of feels like it's a demand management thing. If it's a slow day and you can lower the rates and let people park, that's kind of, or if it's
It wouldn't be
busy
that,
day
it would
and
be,
you
a-
need to raise the rates, you can
Yeah.
see that why they would want that flexibility. But I'm eager to hear what George has to say.
This is not on a daily, this is on.
this is on a seasonal, dish. And it
So you
could
can't do a
stay.
sale. You couldn't lower it for a week.
I mean, we
Raise it
could.
for a week.
I guess we could go with that way too. I mean, it's.
That would just make for even more mass confusion.
with the seasonality of this marketplace, we would probably just stick to the seasons.
And
So
would
if
you-
it's seasonality, then it can come back to us.
Would you explain the increase of the lost ticket? It's from $75 to $150. First blush seemed extreme to me.
No, that's a good question. And, after a certain amount of days, right now, with the lost ticket fee being at $75, the person parking who loses their ticket might surpass that within, depending on the lot and the rate, 10 to 15 days. So in some cases, we do see abuse there too, where
Better to lose your ticket and pay the $75 than to have your ticket and pay the $175.
So if the rate goes up, it only makes sense for the lost ticket to go up as well. But
And
as
there's
I
a
was
way to
telling you,
appeal that, right? If you could
people
prove.
appeal it. They find their the
Ticket.
original lost ticket, which happens more often than you would think. And it's with the technology we have in place, it's really easy to refund the difference between what they pay and what their actual rate was. And we also have video surveillance, so we can see when they came in, and we can go about it that way.
And is 30 days the right number for the short? That doesn't seem short-term to me.
That's a good question. Right now, there's no
There's no max?
There's no max signed or decided on.
So if you want to pay more, you can stay there and stay as long as you want.
Right. I mean, the average length in Lot A is probably less than 5 days.
And we've had abandoned vehicles in Lot A.
Right, that too.
So it gives us that cutoff date of saying, okay, it needs to go. I mean, there's also the side too where if you do need to stay over the 30 days, something happens, we're flexible. You give us a call, give us a heads up.
Your flight gets delayed and.
Yeah, and you're at that 30-day mark, then it's not it's really for a car
Is the
just
board
left there.
comfortable with the 30-day?
I'm kind of hung up on it because I think if it's a short-term lot, 30 days is unreasonable. And you might find somebody who's willing to pay the $18 a day and leave it there for 30 days, and that just defeats the purpose of the short-term lot. So.
Especially since we don't have parking in
Is
front of the
there
airport anymore.
Is there a max?
Yeah, I think 15 would be
a 15-day maximum,
We could do that.
fee scale probably needs to go up if they're going to leave if you leave your car in short-term parking for that long, you should probably expect to get docked.
I think it should be, we need this, the bigger thing for me is we need the space available since we
Right.
don't have it in front of the terminal.
That's the point.
Yeah, and that's
So
where
I
the
would do a
turnovers are.
15-day max and leave the other one at 45.
Okay.
So what I would suggest.
The current stated max at Lot B is 60 days right now, just for you.
Lot B is 60 days?
That's what it says on the sign.
It's hard to imagine leaving your car at the airport for 2 months, but maybe.
But it's cheaper to leave it there
Well,
for 2
people
months.
use it for long-term
Go anywhere
storage
else.
too.
Then
They're not
leave it
flying
here.
anywhere. So
You can live in your car for 60 days in the long term.
Okay.
It's interesting that you'd leave your car there in the elements for 45 days or 60 days even, and not take the Uber or grab a cab, leave the car at home in the garage or.
Some people just like to have their cars there when they come and go.
Every 60
Or they
days.
forget, where did I leave my car?
Well,
That's it too.
if they're coming up here for, they work out of Aspen and go for a consulting job somewhere else. They want to be able to come back and get into their car.
Right.
So, and that may be a, 2-month gig, or even.
It seems, it's hard. It doesn't make sense to me, but okay, let's keep going and see what else you got.
Our lot A, what we have is the highlight really goes from $3 to $5 for every hour after 3 hours, and with a $21 daily max and $150 max lost ticket fee, $30 or 30-day duration. The difference between option 1 and 2, you can see, is 12 to 16 and a $200 lost ticket fee. Our third option that we put together is $5 to $6 from the 3 hours every hour, $24 daily max, and $175 lost ticket fee. The $2 for the 15 to 30 minutes, whereas before it was pretty much free. Was that free, or just it just goes automatically into the $4, right?
In Lot B.
Yeah, from there to there.
Yeah, that would go automatically into the $4.
Yeah.
This one, we added a little buffer zone.
So yeah, so we put a buffer zone in there of 15 to 30 minutes. Lot A of daily, $18 for the daily max, and $225 for the lost ticket fee. And this is the upper end of the pricing options that we had. And as noted, we'll take off 25% adjustment fee or availability, and Lot A to the 30-day, change it to 15 days, and Lot B at 45.
So I think we decided, at least I thought I heard, that we're not going to let the aviation director adjust seasonally, regardless.
Correct. I've taken that. I've made a note of that to take that off the table.
And right now, the current Lot B daily max is how much?
$6.
Yeah, I think these prices are way out of line.
Has to be too high?
Way out of line. I don't think, I understand the issue. The issue is misuse. And I don't think that we should be trying to adjust our rates based on Aspen's parking fees, because that's a different issue. What we want to do is ensure that we've got parking places for the customers who are flying in and out of the Aspen airport. Mm-hmm. And if there is abuse, which there is, we should find another method in terms of addressing that versus what I see is overcharging the customers. I mean, you go DIA, even though it's off-site, it's $5 a day.
Mm-hmm.
On-site is a lot more, but we've got limited spaces. And, you know, to jump up, even to jump up from $6 to $12 a day, that's just a huge increase. And I would rather come up with a method to ensure that spaces that are being occupied are actually being occupied by those people who are flying in and out. And I think there's a system we can come up with to accomplish that.
Yeah, I agree. We definitely want to make sure that we have available parking spaces and that the misuse is curbed. Part of that misuse really is the price discrepancy between, you know, the Aspen prices, and people will park at the airport and catch the free shuttle in.
No, I understand that, but if you just ensure that the only people that can park at the airport, and it's an enforcement issue, I understand it's an enforcement issue, is you've got to be flying in and out. And so to get into the lot, you either have to utilize your barcode scan that you use, your boarding pass, or you make a copy of your boarding pass and you leave it on your dashboard so that it could be seen that that's your departure date and here's your return date. I understand it's an enforcement issue. Someone has to go around and check, but if you don't have that, then you put a heavy fine. You could put a $500 fine for all I care, and that will solve that problem really quickly.
So I have a suggestion. Go ahead. I don't disagree with George. I'm concerned about a hefty increase, but I understand enforcement is difficult. We don't really have a solution to that yet. I would like to defer this and let staff come back with some options and opportunities that might be valid enforcement mechanisms and how we would fund that, and how, you know, it's gonna, I think that's something that we haven't vetted out completely yet.
Okay.
So rather than make a decision of no increase, let's enforce, I don't know what levels of enforcement are possible. I don't know what options we have to select from. And I would like to see that information before making a decision to move this forward.
Okay.
We need to do something. I'm tired of getting those alerts how many times a week that there's no parking or limited parking. I'm tired of knowing that people park there to ride into town or to walk their dogs or to do other things, you know, to take a hike, to ride a bike. That needs to be for our travelers at our airport. I'm just not sure what options we have to enforce that.
I guess I'd pile on. That's kind of the way I've been thinking about this. It'd be great to have the technology to scan a boarding pass along with their whatever else they scan when they come to your kiosk, or have the online app so they can, the reason I brought up the Eagle Airport, I know there's one kiosk at the entrance to the terminal. You walk in, you put in your license plate number, and it keeps track. It charges you for the number of days you're going to be. If you happen to be gone longer, you can go online from wherever you are and up the number of days. You can keep track of it that way, so they know you're paid when they see your car. Just thinking I know there are other technological ways of doing this. I was thinking about the times that I use the airport with my wife. She'll be traveling, and I'll want to leave the car at the airport for her, and I'll depending on how long she's gone or how many hours it is, I'll put it in short term or long term. It would be nice to accommodate locals who are doing that. We don't leave the car at the airport; we take it home. Mm-hmm. But if I have to come into a meeting and she's coming in 2 hours later, it'd be nice to be able to drop the car and grab the bus into town. I've done that a couple of times without getting soaked for a huge fee. Mm-hmm. So it comes down to the intelligence of the system and how do you prove that they really are a traveler? You've got the boarding pass, and the window would be great if we have the ability to scan that. When we know it sounds
we can look at technologies. I will tell you, it's not going to be quick if it's a technological solution.
Right.
Or we're going to have to hire people to do it.
Right. That's what you see.
And then we're going to have to wait.
If it's enforcement, that's the solution. So we'd be adding expense. Is the board open to a yes and we have not raised rates out there for a long time. And George, you're right that I think the pressure we're feeling is, as Aspen has changed their structure to encourage different behaviors, move folks out of the core. This parking facility gets filled and the parking pushes out, into the rings. Why buttermilk isn't utilized more, I don't totally understand. I suspect it has to do with the length of days. Maybe we need to look at allowing people to park at buttermilk for a longer period of time than 4 days. That would be another potential option to discourage folks from utilizing the airport. But this problem is going to persist until we have some incentives, and we're either going to be adding costs and resources for enforcement, and you guys are going to need to promulgate some rules, because frankly there's no rules out there that says the airport has to be used for airport parking.
Right.
I think there is a rule. It's not ours. I thought that we had a rule with, it's just the Stapleton. No, there was something that said we couldn't use a section of that parking. It was the entrance to Aspen or something.
And, a portion of the parking was actually built with EOTC funds.
Yeah.
Not for airport parking, but for intercept type of parking.
Yeah, that was different. That parking.
But there's something that was different.
Which lot?
But
those finger lots.
I understand it's going to be a while before we can get the technology up to
figure out what we need to do.
But it seems like when you go to a hotel and you'll get a placard to put in on your windshield to be able to utilize their parking, so they know that you're a guest staying at the hotel. It seems like we could start with a very simple system like that. You just need to have a copy of your boarding pass,
but we'll need a person to track.
I understand that, but if you have signage on that, going in saying only authorized users who are departing from the airport can park here, you must leave your boarding pass on a copy of your boarding pass on the dashboard. You will be fined X amount of dollars.
But as a practical matter, you guys are going to get calls because 50% of the people aren't going to show up with those.
We're going to get calls if we do this right here.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll take the calls.
Yeah. I would suggest, another suggestion, is to bring us back another revised option that's not this significant increase from $6 to $12 or from $1 to $3. I'm just giving you an example of increase in option one, modify that a bit, take out the clause about the 25% with the aviation director, and increase the free in the long-term lot to 30 minutes. Bring us back a more reasonable option. I don't have a problem doing a reasonable increase at this time since we haven't in a while, but these are all significant, and I know we're trying to kind of deal with what Aspen charges, Highland charges, and Snowmass charges. But until such time as we know the options for enforcement, we have such abuse out there, and we all have our own examples of seeing it. So I think we need to have a further discussion and vet the enforcement issues and how we're going to fund it.
And we may need to look at what rules we'd need to promulgate to actually enforce anything.
Yeah,
Because
the bigger picture.
We can't fine without ordinance authority to fine, and I just don't think that we have all of that in place.
Well, we need to find out.
Yeah. Well, I know we don't have
But in the meantime, well, that we might have other options, but in the meantime, I would not have a problem seeing an option that is more reasonable, brings in the discussion points of the free time in Lot B and the aviation director issue, takes those out, increases the free time for Lot B, brings in more reasonable dollars, gives us some increase at this point, and then bring back the discussion when we have the
Can you
options.
go back to option one? Was that the lowest priced?
It was.
One. So this was the lowest price.
Yeah, I have it.
guess,
It's
was
still
there-
$3 a day from $3 an hour in Lot B from $1, right?
Correct, but the daily max on that is
It's 12 from
It's
6.
12 from 6.
So that's way too high for me.
That's a
Okay,
big
and that's why I'm trying to get a
That's a
sense
huge
of.
jump. I mean,
Option one needs to be modified in the downward trend.
whereas lot A is only it's a $6 increase.
So if you could just bring us back a more reasonable option that we can consider.
maybe $8 a day. I mean,
Okay,
it's
that's
gotta-
what I was trying to get
Yeah,
at.
I-
Is
Yeah.
what is reasonable to you
Yeah, I
guys.
mean, it's got to be reasonable.
Not
And-
doubling.
And then I come back to this comment every time, John, in terms of being able to utilize the intercept lot for long-term overnight parking. Again, similar method. You put your boarding pass on your dashboard so the city knows that you're going to the airport, and you can then utilize the bus. You won't have to utilize, because if you live down Valley, frankly, there's no Ubers, there's no taxis. You know, you can't get to the bus because you can't park overnight in Rafta, so you don't have any options.
Correct.
So we have been having that conversation, and I think with our other partners, and our recommendation in pursuing that, I think it's kind of a yes and. It's not, one thing is going to solve all of it, but it's probably multi-pronged. But we're having a pretty robust public discussion about use of the intercept lot. We think if we're going to start allowing overnight parking, that probably needs to be a public process also. Going forward, we need to incorporate that into some conversation with the neighborhoods and such. And I think our partners would expect that also. So we are having those discussions, George, and I think what's coming back now is if we're gonna change the use of the intercept lot, we should probably do that under a public process of some kind.
Yeah. And
Well, we
again,
have that coming
again,
up.
I would envision that, again, as part of the overflow, specifically for the airport. It's an overflow lot for the airport.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, we have the same kind of issues with, people remembering to make copies
Oh, right.
and yeah.
So then it comes back to, the enforcement issue, and then if we're able to fine for those
And
who
we need
abuse it.
to,
You thought
again,
this
have
was
the
gonna be so
bodies to
easy.
do that. So that's the challenge right
Yeah.
now. Yep.
Do we have any signage about, is there a threat to tow if they're deemed to be parked illegally? Otherwise, not, if they're not.
Well, see, it's not, you guys don't have an ordinance right now.
So that's what I was.
We have
saying.
no way
it's
to
not-
prove they're not flying.
And that's the rub, is that in the absence of that we don't have enforcement capability, so we need to look at those things too.
I would love to see to know the comparisons with the DIA, because I know if you're parked, under the cover at DIA, close in, it's one price, very expensive, and then the farther out you go, the cheaper it gets.
And I use the private parking
Virtually all
lots.
this parking is very close-in parking.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the luxury to have those spots further out is a problem.
Yeah, we're pretty limited to spaces, and off the back of a tour that Kelly did at the airport and asked, and unfortunately she's not here, she wanted to know how many stalls we have, and right now we only have 115 stalls in the short term and 155 stalls in the long term, and 77 for the employees. So parking is at a premium.
The people that use this parking are locals going somewhere, leaving their car for X number of days, so it doesn't seem, then it's getting mixed in with people who are coming in for the very short on-airport related activity, so.
And then on the employees, certainly our employees, we provide bus passes, and we should be providing
Oh my God.
more opportunities. I mean, we have opportunities. We should just be discouraging people from driving up and down Valley when there's a bus stop a BRT stop right at the airport. It couldn't be more convenient, and it's got to be cheaper. So I don't know how we can do that in terms of 77 employee spaces. That's a lot of spaces.
And those fill up really quickly. And those include the SkyWest employees, the American line people, TSA, any of the vendors.
And I don't know if they get bus passes, like the county provides our employees bus passes or not.
I don't think the TSA and the airlines, but ours would, but.
Yeah, I've seen TSA
on the bus?
On a bus.
But I think the other issue is how many employees are working the day they park there? Is there a way to verify that?
So it's kind of hard to monitor that right now, because during the peak season, those will be completely full with employees. We'll badge. I think the number that was thrown at me, we were badging 250 to 300 line people, and so.
Yeah, but we need to add something else because, if I worked at the airport and wanted to come into town and have lunch or dinner or something, I'd park in my free employee thing and jump on a bus and.
Correct.
So I think that's something else we need to look at too. We have to look at all the options and all the possible misuses of that parking areas. It's got to be fair.
Once again, just, not to rub our noses in it, but the Eagle Airport has this very simple kiosk system. You park in their lot, you go in, you enter your license number and the number of days you're going to be gone. And so they have a record. They know and I don't think you include a photo of your car, but they've got your license number. So if they're checking, they know which car is which and how long it's going to be there.
Yeah, but I could go in there and park at our airport and say, I'm going to be gone for 4 days and I'm going hiking.
Well, that's true. You could. That's true.
There's nothing that ties.
That's more the method of payment versus.
It's a payment method and it's tracking, so you know whose car is whose.
Yeah, but I don't care about that. I just care that they're flying or not flying.
You want them to be airport users and nothing
Exactly.
else. I get it. Yeah.
And that's also a different technology of license plate recognition software that we did have out on the RFP. And what we found was the extra work involved with it was going to require a golf cart, and then the other side was snow building up on the license plates to check it. So they're out there also removing snow on the vehicles there. So it was.
Right. It's complicated.
Yeah.
So we need some creativity.
Yeah, but you have staff that goes through the parking lots once a day anyway.
Correct. They inspect it. That's part of their rounds and their checklists. But if it's, but we're also talking about, so they don't actually have the software that LAS has. That's since they're the parking managers. It would have to be a LAS employee checking with their data, whoever registered with their license plate. And if they can't see it, then they'll have to go out and brush it off.
Yeah. They're not doing enforcement activities, though. That'd be a whole different level.
No, I understand that, but
Maybe we should say if they had
there
a
is staff
placard or
available
something on there.
to go once around
to enforce, George, you've got to probably, it's going to take 5 or 6 times the time that doing a parking lot check is going to,
Well,
because you're making sure you're, you
Yeah,
know.
but if we could just start with one to see how it goes, we could worry about it from there.
We've got robots doing
Well,
this already.
as you say, John, we need to have an ordinance to be able to
Something we need to-
come up with fines and things like that. And
Yeah, if you wanted to go that route, it's going to be a different solution than changing the incentives that are causing people to use this infrastructure.
because we know we could, although it's hard to change people's habits, we've changed them in the last month just at the airport in terms of drop-offs, right? So we did a lot.
We're still working on that.
We're still working on it, but it's eventually, people learn, and you got striping, and that problem is probably going to be taken care of. So
And we had
signage and public information, we
Yeah.
can get this done.
We had a huge expense on the other side of that for the enforcement side too, and that's the rub.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it'd be nice to have the list of the incentives and the disincentives as well. It seems as though you've brought us the simplest and easiest proposal, but it's a big one to swallow. So
Unless you want us to direct all of the calls we're gonna get. So let's just see how creative we can be and find something that works, and we can have this work for the travelers.
Okay, so what I'm getting is we'll definitely take off the 25% adjustment off the table. Change the lot from 30 days to 15 days max. The lot B will stay at 45 days. George would like to see the rates more lower, more reasonable, more in like the $8 range, so not
A
at
better
50%.
options than one, a little lower.
Mhm.
But, and also the free 30-minute parking on Lot B.
Correct. Let's see, I had that. Yep, but lot B changed to 30 minutes. Sorry, that was my first bullet point there. And that you'd like to see some different enforcement options that we could implement instead. And then come back with the board with some revised options. Rules to define on the enforcements.
Right.
And then looking at employees paying for parking on that side, just as we're talking about it more, that's still going to be misused because it'll be the airlines paying for that to their employees. So the employees will be free, but the airlines will be paying for it. And
how
then
do we incentivize them to find another way, take the bus? How do we incentivize them to do that?
I think there are some employees that take the bus. I mean, I've seen some, but
I've seen some too.
I think there are employees who misuse it and park there because it's an easy way to not have to pay the city of Aspen prices.
So how far off of the Aspen prices are we now? If we just adjusted this whole thing down, then we're really defeating the purpose.
So,
well,
But is our purpose to charge as much as
again,
Aspen?
I don't think we should be looking at this vis-a-vis Aspen's parking prices. We should be looking at this of how do we ensure that the spaces are only being utilized by airport customers.
It's possible that lowering it less, as George proposals, may make enough of a difference that the problem goes away, at least for the time being.
I think enforcement, just letting people know that we're watching the use out there. Sometimes when, like Leadville or Twin Lakes, you park that sheriff's car on the side of the road, and people, even when you know it's not really a sheriff's car, you still slow down. So sometimes, if they're saying, we know people are abusing this and this is how, and we now have enforcement looking at that, and that we need to find out what our authority would be then to find people who are misusing parking out there, that we can prove are misusing parking.
and the other side of the towing part is where do we tow them to?
What if maybe instead of going the enforcement route, what if we had a differential kind of fee? And we need to talk to Laz about whether this is possible, but what if you set the parking rates higher, but if you show your boarding pass from the flight you're just on or able, and again, I don't know how we do this from a people perspective, but if you can demonstrate you're flying public on the way out, you get a discount off of the higher rates.
That's one of your creative options to enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, would you guys be open to something like
I'd love to
that
hear
versus?
ideas like that.
So George, what it would be is, you know, for the traveling public who is using the airport for airport parking, you are paying that lower rate, whatever it comes out to be upon a demonstration somehow. And we'd need to figure out an efficient way that could occur. Maybe it's a little scanner in the airport, any boarding pass, you get something.
Get a free bag of
if you fail to have that boarding pass on the exit, you're paying a higher. It's just a fee. It's not an enforcement. It's not a fine.
That's fine, and
it's
I
not
would jump
illegal.
that fee up.
You'd be open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I would jump
Okay.
that fee up to $50.
Yeah, if we had a way to do it, that would be a great opportunity. Let's see if
well,
we can
so
do that.
those are some other
See, you're
options
thinking
versus
creative.
enforcement and ticket. It's basically a boarding pass discount. It's kind
You
of
have it at
flipping
the
it.
end of the flight.
But I would make that other
It has to be
price so
current. It
high,
can't be one from 5 years ago.
becomes a real disincentive.
Because that's really what we're trying to do is make the price high as a disincentive,
Right.
not necessarily a fine. So I don't know. if
That's a
there's an
good
option.
idea. We
It
should
may or
look
may
at
not work. If you find a boarding pass in the trash, there'll be a market for boarding pass, old boarding passes there.
Well, there's always a way.
There's a workaround, so let's make sure it.
Yeah, and I
I'm
mean,
gonna start scouring the floors of those planes and
It's easy,
selling them
you'll
out in
find
front of the terminal.
The other thing I don't think we've decided on is the lost ticket pricing, because you had different pricing options.
They'll vary that based on what our ultimate decision is to charge per hour. It has to be compensatory to what the hourly charges are. So that it makes sense to, if you're paying more to park, why not lose your ticket
Yeah.
and then pay less for a lost ticket? So it has to balance.
so if we went to the $24 rate and we stayed at the $75 rate,
And then
day
if
four
you
you
could,
throw away your ticket and
you know, if for some way you could prove, because there's cameras you could prove, I pulled in on this date, there's my boarding pass that shows this is the date I left, this is the date I returned. And you could say, so I was really only there 4 days, I'm not paying $150 for a lost ticket.
Well, I know I've sort of hammered you a little bit, but I'm really glad that you're looking at this, because this is a real problem
We hear about it all
for the
the time.
community. So I thank you for coming up with some of these ideas to sort of get us thinking of how to really address this issue.
yeah, if you have other ideas, definitely shoot them my way.
Don't worry, we'll be thinking of things.
Yeah, so I mean, just kind of as a heads up, as a head count type of thing, or more increased employee, it's very labor intensive to be able to make sure to enforce that discount, because you're going to have someone there, basically
Checking IDs.
open to
and-
close, yeah, and that
No,
everybody
yeah.
that pays is going to have to do it. And currently, I don't think that any of our other
Kevin will
equipment.
do it.
We'll have to figure some.
Maybe there's a technology,
Let
we don't
Kevin
know.
do it.
It's less labor intensive than writing a summons, having that go through a process, and trying to collect fines.
And some people may not care to
I'd
pursue
rather
it, they'll just
collect
pay
it
it.
before the car's out of the.
We have a percentage which will do that.
So when would this come back to us? What sort of, I mean, I don't want to wait 6 months for this.
So we actually shooting for the June 26th resolution for the first reading. So yeah, so but I think a work session is on the 25th, if I remember right.
We'll see what we can do before the 25th. I don't know. Unfortunately, the creativity and modeling always takes more time, George.
Right.
So
No, I appreciate
So
that.
he's just saying we'd like it sooner than later.
Yeah,
We want to sort of keep this process going. You guys have
we'll
started
have it
this,
nailed
which is
down by
great.
this time next year, George.
No, I appreciate. Yeah, and we've also got this is kind of the season for learning and conferences and that sort of thing, as you guys know. So, and this June is a big one for the airport. So,
How is the curbside going now?
interesting. We've got some. So we still have people that, even though we've put the lines in, we still got people that back in and will park just like before. There's a lot of pushback on the ones that do. And then the most recent thing that we've seen is instead of parking at an angle, now they just park in the lanes. So, we have staff out there continually asking people to, can you please keep moving? People for the most part are good people. They'll, go ahead and circle, and we even offer, hey, a good cell phone lot is the intercept lot. It's, if you think it's gonna be more than half an hour, the intercept lot's 2 to 3 minutes away.
Or buttermilk. But can't you park there and be with your car? I thought it was unattended vehicles only.
No,
Isn't that what the sign says?
the full, that was, we did it in incremental steps. So that was the middle step, the interim step, till we could get the pass-through lanes. The true TSA compliance is that it's a drop-off and loading only. If you're not doing that, then you have to move.
So the last time I was there, the parking lanes were still there, so I was okay to back in and stand at my car. I want to make sure I wasn't breaking any rules.
But those are gone now, and
I haven't been out there for a while.
The pass-through lanes are there, more like what you see in almost every other airport. So the idea is to keep it moving and either do the loop or find a cell phone lot or lot A for the half hour, or I guess hour right now.
Well, I did have to talk to two of the parking guys there who got persuaded by this really cute girl with her really cute puppy to let her go into the terminal and leave her card. I'm like,
Yeah, you got to let us know about that, please. That's.
I said, that's
Please.
not happening while I'm standing.
I've got grant insurances that I have to follow. So.
Yeah, Buttermilk would be the perfect spot for the cell
phone.
for a cell phone.
That's what they do at DIA. They have those areas in front of DIA you can pull off.
Yeah. And right now it's an hour, so it's lot A is an hour, lot B is an hour.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
It's a shame that people have to, that they're going to burn a lot more gas and leave their car idling that much longer.
We drive it around.
In circles.
Well, that's what a cell phone lot or using like Buttermilk or the short term
Somebody
to the
can go
degree
to them
that
in
they
front
can.
of the
but
airport.
That's filling up too.
They do at DIA?
So that's probably something we need to think about in terms of education and signage. Because that's a new use we really haven't utilized for Buttermilk, but it's a perfect opportunity now that we're going to that new curbside rules for the airport.
Go over to Roxy's and buy lunch.
Go have lunch.
Yeah, there's a lot, and there's also, I got to give our staff a lot of credit. They get a lot of verbal abuse, and we,
No doubt.
so.
We've been
we hear a
spoiled
lot
for
of
so
that.
many years, right? It's been one of the nicer things to have such a small town airport, but that's just not part of it anymore.
Yeah.
We understand that.
Okay.
Well, okay.
We'll see you
Good luck.
soon, gentlemen.
See you
Thank
soon.
you.
Thank
All right.
you for
Thank you very
thanks
much.
for hearing us out.
Oh, no problem.
It was a good conversation starter.
Oh, definitely. This is the only way to do it. It's been so long, so.
It'd be nice to have an economic analysis or a psychological, an economist who could talk about the price points that will help create what we're trying to get. Because maybe it won't be such a high price increase to get what we're trying to, reduce the number of
All these
users.
calls. I'm getting all these calls where people are watching this and everybody's.
And that was actually, we had some input on the psychology of it from the city of Aspen. So that's kind of where we got the numbers from.
We don't necessarily want to mirror that.
Yeah, no, and it wasn't the.
He's already done the homework, right?
Yeah, it wasn't really the numbers that he was giving us. He was kind of giving us the psychology of it, of where the incremental changes, where you start seeing that curve, that learning curve happening and the behavior curve happening.
How you create the disincentive, where it works and when it doesn't.
Correct.
Right.
So that's kind of where we kind of came up with this one. So
You'll
we'll look at it.
Bring
some
it
more.
on back to us. Kelly and Steve will be here too, so you'll get 5 times.
Okay.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
You have a good day.
Coming in. Thanks, Kevin. Hang in there.
Did you guys get the press release
Which,
about the accident on Little Annie's?
No.
It was a good friend of mine.
sorry.
He's snowmobiling and he was pronounced dead at the scene.
Let's see. I think we can adjourn now. We've got nothing else to talk about here. Thanks, Grassroots.
Thank you.
We're done. 3:40.
Thanks, guys.
you.